Hi YouTube, welcome to my Season 15 Vladimir guide. I put a lot of time and effort into this guide, so definitely leave a like and subscribe if this video has helped you out in any way. Now, if you're really serious about climbing, I also offer coaching. If that's something you're interested in, check the link in the description box. And last but not least, if you want to see me play Vladimir live, I do stream both on Twitch and YouTube, so what are you waiting for? Go check it out, because I might actually be live this very moment. Alright then, let's get started. First of all, let's talk a bit about Vladimir's champion identity. In essence, Vladimir is a scaling, immobile, short-range champion that has lots of sustain and AoE damage. So let's break it down. Vladimir is first and foremost great at scaling. That means that you want to avoid taking too many risks in the early game, because the early game is your weakest moment. It only makes sense that if you play a champion that's ridiculously strong in the mid and late game, that you strive for a consistent early game by prioritizing consistent gold income, such as farming, over taking fights. In short, farm, 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 and never stop farming. Vladimir is basically playing Farm Simulator. Additionally, if you play Vladimir, get ready to be flamed by your entire team just because you're not joining all the 2 million random teamfights, because you will be farming and actually making a good decision. Now that's something you'll have to deal with. My advice, just mute all or /deafen, and that way you will have a lot more peace of mind. So keep in mind, as long as enemies are getting something, but you're also trading something for it, like minion waves, turret plates, etc., you'll be fine. And then when you have 3 items, you will solo carry every teamfight. Now, Vladimir is also short-ranged and immobile, and that's not particularly a great combination. That's why you'll have to rely on items, runes, summoner spells, and whatever you can use that will offer you some form of mobility. Additionally, vision control will be of key importance, as playing around vision provides you with great flank angles that allow you to get onto the enemy carries, even though you're a short-ranged and immobile champion. So basically, Vladimir has a very similar approach to teamfights as most assassin-type champions, playing around vision, looking for flank angles, etc. Now, Vladimir also has lots of sustain. That sustain will mainly help you during the lane phase to scale and make sure you don't go 0-10 in the early game. Now, of course, having so much healing is always useful, whether you're in the early game, whether you're side laning or team fighting, but generally speaking, playing properly around your sustain is mainly important during the lane phase, as that's when you're at your weakest, and thus you will actually have to rely on your sustain. And last but not least, Vladimir has an insane amount of AoE damage. That means that you're really good at damaging multiple people at the same time, making you a god at team fighting. So in short, your goal as Vladimir is to scale, get some items, and then solo carry the mid and late game team fights, such as the Baron team fights and the Dragon team fights. Next up, the mindset. So the main thing that you have to understand when you want to win games as Vladimir is that scaling doesn't mean do nothing, just farm and let the enemies take whatever they want until you have 3 items. That's actually how you lose games with Vladimir. Now, how do you win games as Vladimir? Well, it's actually quite simple. You mainly have to do 2 things specifically in the lane phase. So 1, focus on farming and getting as much gold as possible. 2, while doing all that, while focusing on the farming and making sure you don't die, make sure that your mid lane opponent also can't roam. Now, if you focus on farming and you're not dying, then the enemy mid laner has only one option to outplay you, and that's by outroaming you, so impacting the map and getting, for example, a double kill while you're farming mid lane. So at all times, whenever possible, pressure your lane opponent whenever they're looking for a roam. So if you can do these 2 things, farming and not dying, and then also making sure your opponent can't roam, you will already have a very consistent early game. All that's left now for you to do is to start punishing the enemy mid laner whenever they make a mistake, and see if you can solo kill them. So on top of just farming and scaling and keeping them in lane, you can definitely look for getting some solo kills by punishing their mistakes. Maybe they walk up when they don't have their abilities on cooldown, you can go for a trade. And it's that limit testing, finding how far you can go in solo killing people, that will also help you climb significantly faster. So yes, Vladimir can definitely get solo kills in the mid lane. And again, once you start doing that, you will scale even faster, and rather than becoming a late game champion, you will suddenly become a mid game god. And last but not least, objective trading is Vladimir's bread and butter. Meaning that if the enemies are, for example, taking a herald on the top side of the map, look to turret dive the enemy bot lane on the bot side of the map. So as Vladimir, it's only normal that you can't always contest the enemies in the early game. So often you'll have to look for some kind of trade. So again, perhaps you can't contest the enemies when they're taking the void grubs, but you might be able to take the dragon while they are doing the void grubs, and that way you traded one objective for another. This way you might not fall behind as much as when you wouldn't do the dragon and just farm while they're doing the grubs. So you still have to be active on the map, but as long as you trade something for something else, you should be fine because ultimately you do outskill almost everyone. Alright, let's talk about the different rune setups that we could be going on Vladimir. First and foremost, let's talk about the standard setup. The most standard setup that you could go on Vladimir, we'll just call it Phase Rush Standard. There we go. So, you already hear it, we're gonna select Phase Rush here. And I'll quickly make the rune page to show you guys what the standard typically looks like. Well, we have multiple options here, but I'll go with this one for now. And slowly but surely, we'll go through this rune page and through all the other viable ones. So the standard rune page for Vladimir would be Phase Rush. Just like I talked about in the champion identity, Vladimir is quite immobile. So it's only logical that we look for things that will give us movement speed into our runes, our builds, our summoner spells. That's why typically Phase Rush is the most standard and best setup, the best keystone for Vladimir specifically. The reason for that is, of course, it gives us slow resistance and it gives us a burst of movement speed. It's great to run enemies down, it's also great to escape from enemies. Since we're an immobile champion, that's amazing. So that's going to be the standard keystone that we're going to be running on Vladimir. Next up here, we have two options. We have Axiom Arcanist and we have Nimbus Cloak. Again, Nimbus Cloak is going to give us a burst of movement speed after activating a summoner spell. So again, this will give us movement speed, so therefore Nimbus Cloak is going to be the standard setup for Vladimir. And here we have three options. This one will give us more damage the healthier we are. Typically as Vladimir in the lane phase you can't really use this, because you're going to get poked a lot, right? Because we're not that strong in the early game, we're immobile, we're short range, so absolute focus is not that useful. Next up we have Celerity. Celerity, it will increase all the the movement bonuses on us. Like if we have let's say we activate Ghost, it will be more effective because of this rune. So you might think, okay, that's great, like even more mobility, so we're gonna go this. In theory, yes, but this one, Transcendence, is gonna be the standard because this is just better. Now the reason for that is, next to being immobile, Vladimir also has very high ability cooldowns. So he needs ability haste in any way, shape or form. So then, since we already have a great mobility in our summoner spells with our builds and then with Phase Rush and Nimbus Cloak, we're going to go for ability haste here over Celerity. So that's why we're always going to go Transcendence. Then here for the runes here in the bottom row, we have three options. Again, I would only consider two of these, and Gathering Storm is going to be your standard setup. This says, the longer the game goes on, the more AP you will get from this rune. So it's just, hey, you're 30 minutes into a game, you get 80 AP for free from this rune. So that's useful when you play a scaling champion like Vladimir, right? Because the longer the game goes on, the more items you have, the stronger you are. So this rune definitely synergizes very well with Vladimir. Now, sometimes you are in a game where you kind of don't want to go Gathering Storm because you might think, oh, the enemy team and my team comp were like so early game oriented, the game is probably not gonna last that long, or I'm in a lane phase where I need a little bit of extra damage because that could be the difference between solo killing them or not, or it could just make my laning phase a lot easier. In that case, you could go for Scorch, which is gonna give you a little bit more damage. When you hit people with abilities, you will deal some extra burn damage to them. So this could be useful when you play for lane. It's an early game rune. Gathering Storm is for scaling. That's why it's going to be the standard Vladimir setup. Now, in the secondary, well, maybe I can explain a little bit more about the primary rune tree here first. So if you go a little bit more damage, if you play more for lane, you could also argue that you want to go Summon Ahri instead of Phase Rush. Now, why would we ever want to go Summon Ahri if you are in a lane that you can easily bully? Let's say you play into something like a Katarina. Katarina is also very weak. She's even weaker than the Vladimir in the lane, specifically like level 1, right? So you can really bully her a lot. You can get in a lot of auto attacks, you can get in a lot of Qs. So if you can consistently attack her with auto attacks, with Qs, with your abilities, Summon Ahri is gonna be great. Now then, of course, if you go for laning phase, if you're full laning phase oriented, you really want to dominate the lane, you could definitely say, hey, I don't want to go Gathering Storm because I'm playing for my lane since I go summon Ahri. So then I'm going to pair that up with Scorch. That's why typically this is what we call the Phase Rush rune page. This is what we call the Ahri Scorch rune page. We call it Ahri Scorch because if you go Ahri, you almost always go Scorch because it synergizes so well. Now, something I've been doing a lot lately is actually desyncing this. So actually going Gathering Storm with Summon Ahri. Because I've noticed that when I'm playing in an easy matchup like Katarina, I can also kill her even if I don't go to Scorch. I can't kill her, or like it's harder to kill her if I just go Phase Rush. So I like to go some form of damage, and then I prefer going Ahri, and then still go Gathering Storm here for the scaling, because I don't need the Scorch. Just so you understand, guys, it's really a trade-off. This is great in late game, but if this really helps you get a solo kill in lane and accelerate you and get you to scale quicker, it's also very viable. So it's like, you have to notice in the matchup itself, like, do you need this? Will you get a lot of value from this, or is it just better to go scaling? So that's typically why we either go this to get lots of value from this, or we go this to go full scaling. I like to go something hybrid lately. That's definitely something that's completely viable, but it is personal preference. Now let's get back to the standard setup here, which is what we were talking about, something like this, right? And then the standard setup on Vladimir right now in the current meta would be something like this. This is currently my favorite rune page. So we go scaling here with Phase Rush, Gathering Storm. We have Legend Haste, so this will also give us ability haste together with Transcendence, so it will make sure that, yeah, you will have your Qs up more, you will have your E up more, your W more. Your champion just functions a lot better if you have more, or if you have less cooldown on your abilities. So it really makes you strong. I love this rune. I feel like it's, yeah, if you don't go it, you really notice it in game. So I love to have it. So it's like, whenever you don't take this, it's quite a big trade-off. So this is for me the standard. And then when I'm really forced to take something else, then I will trade this for something else, of course. But this is for me the standard because it's that good of a rune. And then here underneath, this is also really good. Last Stand. This is my personal preference. This will make sure that you will have more damage the lower you are. So if you are in a fist fight lane like a Sylas, like, you know you're going to fist fight with a Sylas. He's going to get onto you. He's going to jump onto you. So, of course, you're going to fist fight him. So then you know you're going to get low. You're going to fight him a lot. And then the lower you are, the more damage you deal. And I just love to have this rune in general. Now, you could also go with Cut Down. It's personal preference at this point. But I always prefer Last Stand. Specifically when I'm in the lane where I know I'm going to get low a lot of the time, I go Last Stand. If I want a bit more fist fighting power in the lane, but I'm not necessarily under a threat of like constantly being low, then I would just go Cut Down. But typically I just go Last Stand. It allows you to go really aggressively in trades. Now you can already like probably think this up, but if you go Last Stand for like early damage in the lane, if you are in a fist fighting lane like a Sylas or something, then you probably also want to take Ahri here and maybe even Scorch, right? Because all of this synergizes really well. Extra damage, extra damage, extra damage. Now, of course, for all this extra damage, you are sacrificing scaling. So if you don't need all of this extra damage, you could argue, I'm just going to go here scaling and then this damage. And if this is enough for your lane, then I would recommend going this because that way you still enable your scaling really, really well. But that's where you have to find your own personal preference. Lately, I've been enjoying a lot of Ahri with Gathering Storm. So damage, damage, and scaling. That's currently my personal favorite, but I would say this is currently the standard. Now, with that being said, you could go Axiom Arcanist over Nimbus Cloak. That's also something I want to mention. Now, the reason for it is, so Axiom Arcanist, what it's going to do. So your ultimate has 14% increased damage, which is really good on Vladimir because you're really a team fighting champion, so your ultimate is extremely important. It will also give you extra healing and shielding. You don't have shielding on your ultimate, but you do have healing, which is really, really nice, right? And then scoring a takedown, so a kill or an assist on an enemy champion, reduces your ultimate current cooldown by 7%. Which is also super important because, yeah, your ultimate is very important on Vladimir. So having it deal more damage, giving you more healing, and having a lower cooldown if you get a takedown is really, really good on Vladimir. The thing is, if you, like, this still gives you mobility, which is also really important. So which one do you want? Well, if you already have a lot of mobility in your setup, so for example, later this guide, we're going to talk about summoner spells. So if you have a lot of mobility in your summoner spells, where you go, for example, something like Ghost and Flash, then I would say you don't necessarily need the Nimbus Cloak because you already have so much mobility. So then in that case, you could go Axiom Arcanist. Now, if you're in a fist fight lane like a Silas and you say, oh, I really would like to have Ignite over Ghost, so I would go like Ignite Flash, then I would say you have less mobility, so I would definitely go with Nimbus Cloak to have some extra mobility then. But if you go Ghost Flash, Axiom Arcanist is amazing. Hopefully that clears things up. But for now, I'll change it back to the standard. This is the standard setup. And then could you make any changes here? Not necessarily. We're going to talk about the other rune trees that we could go into. But here in the precision tree, as a secondary rune tree, I would not change anything here. Alright, for the mini runes then, I always go ability haste. I never change this because again, Vladimir needs a lot of ability haste. Then here I always go the adaptive force for some damage. And then here in the lower and the bottom row, you can make some changes. So we have flat health and we have health scaling. Not many people know this. And for me, it's very simple. So if you are in a fist fighting lane, typically like a Silas or something, where you know I'm going to be fighting a lot in the early game, right? Like a Silas is going to jump onto me. I'm probably going to fight him a lot. I like to use the Silas example. You guys probably noticed that. But then in a lane like that, where you're going to be fighting a lot, flat health is, yeah, it might make you live in the early lane, right? It might get you a solo kill level 3 because you live and you didn't die to an ignite or something like that. So then flat health is amazing in the fist fight lane. If you're in a lane where you're like scaling, let's say you play versus a Veigar or something, yeah, we're not really focusing on solo killing a Veigar, we're just going to scale, then you can just go health scaling. So again, I think it makes sense that if you just look at this objectively, health scaling, so we go scaling, then we're going to go Gathering Storm, Phase Rush, something like that, right? Typically, if you go flat health, again, you're probably going to be focusing more on going something like Ahri Scourge with flat health because you would only go this in a fist fight lane. And in the fist fight lane, you need extra damage. So then you would go Ahri and Scourge, typically. But again, it's a trade-off. You're going to give up some scaling here. So then you might want to have some extra scaling here. And then you see how you can play around with this, where it's always a trade-off between early game damage and scaling. But for now, I'll put it on the full scaling setup because that is the standard page, because ultimately we are a scaling champion. Now, can you change anything here from rune tree? Yes, you could go into the inspiration tree, for example, and here you have some options. Personally, I like to go Cosmic Insight. It will give you summoner spell haste and item haste, and I mainly go this for the summoner spell haste. So in the mentality and in the beginning of the video, we explained that, hey, one of your weaknesses is mobility. So summoner spells like Ghost and Flash give you mobility. So having the extra summoner spell haste, so having your Ghost and Flash quicker on cooldown again, is very useful on Vladimir. So this is a great rune. And then I would combine this with anything you can find here. I feel like all of these are really bad on Vladimir right now. So then I would go with Biscuit Delivery. This is fine because it will, one, help you in lane. It will give you 12% of your missing health. So this is useful in a lane where you are playing versus somebody who can permanently poke you or just damage you, where you need some extra sustain. And this is also going to increase your maximum health, which is also really good on Vladimir. Now, in theory, you could also go Cashback, right? This is also a scaling setup. Personally, I never go it on Vladimir, so I wouldn't advise it. So if you go into the inspiration tree, I would go with this. Now, again, keep in mind, for me, this is the bread and butter of Vladimir, this rune here. So I would only go this as a trade-off, right? I would only say, oh, I really can't go this. So then I would go this setup here. Now, this is not something that you're really forced to go, right? It's not like this will give you extra resistances or anything else. This is like the back in the day standard setup for Vladimir, the Cosmic Insight. Right now for me, this one has taken, is more important. Now, I'm pretty sure you might still have Vladimir mains who say, no, I like this one more. This is my standard bread and butter page. That's why I share it with you guys. But I almost never go this anymore. For me, this rune is just so important, and this rune as well, that I always go this setup. This is my standard page, and then I almost never go the inspiration tree, which was the previous standard rune page for Vladimir. Now, with that being said, for what would I trade this rune page sometimes? Well, if I really need resistances, if I'm really playing a difficult matchup, let's say I'm playing versus a Syndra, or let's say I'm playing versus an Orianna, a champion who can constantly poke me and I need extra healing and sustain to really get through the lane without losing too much farm, without dying, etc. In that case, I would go into this tree, the Resolve tree, go Second Wind and Overgrowth. Overgrowth is going to give me extra maximum health, so great scaling. And Second Wind is going to get me some extra healing against poke damage. If you play versus an assassin and like against a Fizz or something, you could definitely go something like Bone Plating. Bone Plating will make sure that you will take less burst damage. So this is a great setup against assassins, or like against burst type champions. This is a great setup against like mages who can constantly poke you. So that's going to be the main setup. Now, sometimes you could also go conditioning. Like if you really want to be like tanky in a team fight, then you could say, hey, I'm going to go conditioning. This will give you extra resistances after 12 minutes into the game. So this basically means that if you don't need Second Wind, if you don't need the Bone Plating, like you have a relatively easy lane, you could go this and then you're going to go full health and resistance scaling. But then again, if I don't need Second Wind or I don't need Bone Plating, I just prefer to go this setup. But you have people who say, no, I like this one as well. Like if I don't need this, I like this one. Like it's going to give me like lots of HP. That's completely fine. When could you go this? Like for example, let's say you play versus an Akali. Akali, it's difficult to kill her in lane, but it's also difficult for her to kill you in lane, I feel like. So you don't necessarily need Second Wind. You don't necessarily need Bone Plating. But once she has some items and right, she can just one-tap you almost. So then in the side lane, to have some more survivability against her, having a bit more max health, having a bit more armor and magic resist is going to help you living against her. So you don't really need the help in the laning phase, but it could be very useful in the side lane to lane against an Akali if you have this setup. So into specific niche matchups, you could definitely go this, but I almost never go it. And like Akali would be one of the only matchups where I would consider going this in. But even then, right now I like this so much that I would just go this setup. Alright, now of course the same goes guys for what I already explained. If you go something like here into a poke matchup, right? So you play against Syndra, Orianna, so those poke matchups where you're having a hard lane, you typically just go full scaling here and then just extra sustain. If you play versus an assassin with burst damage, you could consider going Bone Plating. And then if the lane is winnable, so for example if you play versus a Zed, you could go Summon Ahri with Scorch, full aggressive in the early lane, Bone Plating against her early game burst damage, and you're fully set up for their early game damage. Not something I like. Typically, I like to go as much scaling as possible. So even against a Zed, I would probably go something like this. Right, that would be my personal favorite into a Zed matchup, for example. Even though if you really want to play fully for the matchup and give you as much advantage as possible in the matchup, this would probably be better. But then you are left off with less scaling towards the mid and late game teamfights. Alright, but let's change this back to the standard setup here. And then is there something else you could go? No, I never go into the domination tree and we covered everything else. So then this here, turn it back, is going to be your standard setup. Do you have other rune trees that you could work with? Yes. I never go into the inspiration keystones. I never go into the domination keystones. They buffed electrocute recently, but I haven't really tested it out. And I still feel like the rest of this rune tree is really weak. So electrocute might be worth it actually right now as a keystone, but the rest of the tree is still really weak on Vladimir. That's why I wouldn't and why I don't consider it in this very moment. But it has been viable in the past, and if they buff the rest of the rune tree a little bit, I feel like it could definitely be viable again in the future, but for me right now, it's not worth it yet. So then, what would I pick? So we already went over sorcery. We're not going to go into inspiration. We're not going to go into here into the domination tree. Precision tree. This is definitely a tree that you could go into, because again, we have the legend haste. We have the last stand, right? So what would I go then? I would go Conqueror and Triumph. That's what I would go. Now, why would I go Conqueror and Triumph and Legend Haste and Last Stand? When would I go the Conqueror keystone? Very simple. When the enemy team has a lot of melee, so at the very least like 3 melee champions in their team that are bruiser / tanky. Because what, like in the end, what is Conqueror? Conqueror is a stacking mechanism that will say, hey, the longer you are in a fight, the more auto attacks and abilities you do. If you finally get to 12 stacks, you will get like healing. You get more damage the more stacks you have. So it gives you extra damage and healing at 12 stacks. So at 12 stacks, you get extra healing. Before that, while the stacks are ramping up, you already get increased damage. So it's really strong the longer you are in a fight. Of course, if you play versus champions like Jinx, yeah, she's a ranged champion. It's very difficult to constantly auto-attack and Q her. She's also very squishy, so by the time you stack this, she's probably already dead. So this is better into team comps where the enemies have something like an Amumu jungle with a Leona support, with a set top lane, something like that, right? Now, I would only go Conqueror in a matchup where, yes, the enemy team have like Bruiser melee team comp, but I also need to be able to use it in the lane. For example, if I play into, I'm going to say something like a Syndra, I'm never going to be able to use a Keystone into her, even though this might be good into her team once we get to the mid and late game team fights. Then I wouldn't go that, because Phase Rush is also good into Syndra in lane, and also good in mid and late game team fights. So then I would just go the standard setup, right? So I would only go this if it's one, I can use it in my lane, and it's good into the enemy team comp in the mid and late game team fights. Now, when would it be good in my lane? When you play against something fist fight heavy, a melee champion that will like to jump onto you, you're going to have some long fights, you're going to be able to auto-attack them easily because they're melee. So something like a Sylas, for example. Now that's where it comes down to personal preference. Into those melee matchups, you could go Ahri Scourge for extra damage, and you could go Conqueror for extra damage. Which one do you choose? Well, again, if I'm playing versus a Sylas, for example, and his teammates do, like the rest of his team is like ranged and squishy, then I would go Ahri Scourge, because I'm not going to benefit from Conqueror and mid and late game team fights. I would only benefit from it in lane, but then Ahri Scourge is actually stronger in lane than Conqueror, but of course a lot less useful in team fights. So if I don't need Conqueror in team fights, I would only need it in lane. I would prefer this one, right? Now, if I can use Conqueror in lane and it's also really good for team fights, of course I'm going to go Conqueror. So hopefully that makes sense. Now the standard setup then would be Conqueror, Triumph, Legend, Haste, Last Stand. Again, you could go for this one if you really want to, but I do prefer Last Stand, specifically in matchups where I'm gonna get low. If I'm not gonna get low, I can of course go for Cut Down. Otherwise, Last Stand. Now that's it for this tree. Would I change anything here? No, I would always use this tree. Now again, what would be the secondary, like the standard secondary setup here? So I'll call this Conqueror, the Conqueror page. What is the standard setup for, like, back in the day, it used to be this. So the very standard setup on Vladimir would be this when you want to go Conqueror, right? So the Conqueror, the standard Conqueror setup would be this. So then, again, Transcendence for the ability, Haste, Nimbus Cloak for the movement speed. There we go, right? That's the standard setup. However, if I'm going Ghost Flash, which I often do, we're going to talk about that later this video, you don't necessarily need Nimbus, and then I like to go extra scaling with Gathering Storm, and actually this is my personal preference, Transcendence with Gathering Storm, for the extra scaling on your champion. Because ultimately it just feels bad when you get to a 30, 35, 40 minute game on Vladimir, and you like lack the extra AP from Gathering Storm, and now you have like, you struggle to even get like 700 AP or something, right? It really feels bad because you're like you're that late game raid boss, but due to your runes, you're so much weaker if you go this, right? So I feel like if I don't need the extra mobility, if I already have Ghost Flash, I could go something like this. If I were to go Ignite Flash, you can definitely go Nimbus Cloak with Transcendence. Now, ultimately, if you really want to, you could go Scorch, but again, then you're trading Nimbus Cloak for Scorch, and I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of that, because again, if you were to go Scorch, you're really in a fistfight heavy matchup, and then you would go Ignite, and if I want to go Ignite, then I don't have Ghost. And if I don't have Ghost, I need the extra mobility, so I would go Nimbus Cloak then. So I never go Scorch, even though it is an option on Vladimir. But this would be the standard setup, and this would be my personal preference when I go Conqueror. I almost always go this, because I also always go Ghost Flash when I go Conqueror. Alright, that's it for the Conqueror setup. Are there any more setups on Vladimir? Yes, there's actually one more. You could go Grasp on Vladimir, believe it or not. It used to be quite popular a while ago when people did the W max. Right now we're back to the old Q max. But Grasp is still fine. So when would you go Grasp? Typically into a matchup where you're just scaling and you can proc it a lot. So for example, if we scale, so we said, hey, we play versus Orianna, Syndra, we can't really kill them, they're a difficult matchup. We're just going to go the standard scaling setup. We're going to need extra resistances because it's a very hard matchup, so we go this, right? Scaling plus escape plus extra healing to make sure we get through the matchup. Now you also have another form of scaling, and that's Grasp. Grasp, if you proc it, right, you're going to deal an extra damage to your opponent, and you're going to get extra maximum health. So this rune page, if you can constantly proc Grasp, you will get a lot of extra health, so then in the mid and late game teamfights you will be tankier, so it's also a very good way of actually scaling. Now that means that you need to be able to proc it a lot in lane, so typically you go this against, like, if you're top lane for example and you're playing into a Nasus. You can't really kill a Nasus, so you just have to scale against him, and you can actually constantly bully him, so with Grasp of the Undying here you're also going to scale really well. But hopefully you see the difference. If you play versus a Syndra in the mid lane, you can't really hit this on her, and also it's not free scaling, you're actually struggling in that matchup. Grasp of the Undying is more when you have like a fine matchup, you're not really under a threat of getting killed, and you can constantly auto-attack them to proc your Grasp. That way it's also a way of scaling. So then if you go Grasp, you could go this into matchups like Akali or into a Nasus top lane, something like that, right? Or into a Sion even, you could go all those things. Now, what would be the rest of this rune page? These two runes are useless on Vladimir, so then I would go Demolish. And then here again, it depends. If you play versus something like a Nasus, yeah, he's not going to poke you typically, maybe with his E, but also he's not going to poke you that much, so you could go Bone Plating, right? If you play into a poke matchup, you could go Second Wind, but again, it doesn't make sense. Because a poke matchup like Syndra, they are ranged champions. People who can poke you all the time are ranged, and into a ranged matchup, yeah, you wouldn't take Grasp in the first place because you wouldn't be able to get off your auto attacks a lot. So typically the only viable thing that you could go is either Bone Plating or Conditioning. I just go with Conditioning, because again, you go typically Grasp as well in a matchup where you're not under a threat of getting killed. It's just like, you can't kill them, but they can't kill you. So it's like a fine matchup. So then I would just go Conditioning because you don't need these two, right? And then last but not least, I would go Overgrowth here. Again, these two, I'm not a big fan of them right now in the current meta, so just go Overgrowth for extra maximum health and scaling, which synergizes really well the extra max health that you get from this, together with the extra max health from Grasp of the Undying. Then what would you use this with? Again, you need, like typically you need this page, right? You always need the sorcery page because it gives you scaling, ability haste, and here Gathering Storm. So that's what I would go. Again, you could go Nimbus Cloak, Last Stand, if you go like Ignite, but again, typically you wouldn't go Ignite because you can't kill your lane opponent. That's why we're going this. So then if you can't kill your lane opponent, you're just going to go Ghost Flash for scaling in the team fights. So then you just always go Transcendence, Gathering Storm in these type of matchups. Could you go Legend Haste, Last Stand? For sure, right? You also get Ability Haste, like Transcendence and Legend Haste are like the same rune almost, right? So it's fine. But then you're missing out on Gathering Storm and you would have Last Stand. Again, do you need Last Stand? No, because typically you're not under a threat of dying or getting low in these type of matchups where you go Grasp. So then you don't need Last Stand, and that's why we get free scaling with Gathering Storm. Hopefully that explains everything really well, because that's it for the rune pages, and then we can call this one Grasp. That's it for all the rune setups that there are in the game. I've explained everything, I think, quite thoroughly. If you do have some questions, let me know in the comments down below. Now, I feel like, personally, that most Vladimir players, they just go the first build that you see here on the screen, which is the standard build, and they do it in like 99% of their games, but I feel like there's a lot more you can optimize build-wise if you really want to climb with Vladimir. So first and foremost, let's start with that standard build. So it's very simple. The standard build is typically going to be Sorcery Shoes. So you have some pen. It's like, you could go Ionian Boots, but Sorcery Shoes, they're typically a better first item power spike on boots. So then Sorcery Shoes are typically preferred over Ionian Boots. To have some ability haste in our build, then typically you go Cosmic Drive. It gives you some survivability with HP. It gives you the ability haste. And that's the main reason why we typically go it. Also, it gives you the movement speed, but after the nerfs a couple of patches ago, I'm not really going it necessarily for the movement speed. It's still just in general one of the only items that gives Vladimir 25 ability haste, and that is just insanely good. Now, on your second item, if you don't need a Void Staff on your third item, you could actually go Riftmaker second item, then a Death Cap, and then a Void Staff. Now, if you need your Void Staff earlier, so let's say you have like 3 APs on your team, so you're like playing Vladimir mid lane, they have a Gwen top lane, and you play Vladimir mid, you have a Gwen top and a Luke support. You have 3 AP champions on your team in that case, so the enemies are very likely to at some point build magic resist. So then I would say you will definitely need your Void Staff as soon as possible on the third item. And then typically you don't want to like stall your Death Cap, like your most powerful item in the game, to your fourth item. You don't want to do that. So when you need your Void Staff, because you have a lot of AP on your team, I would go Death Cap secondary and then Void Staff as a third item. And then you could go as a fourth item, whatever you like. That could be a Riftmaker because it's a very gold efficient item on you. But if you need more survivability, you could go with Zhonya's, you could go with Banshees. There's a lot of options that you could choose from. But that's going to be the main build. Now, I'm also not going to talk specifically about like full builds because I feel like you almost never get to full build. And you can basically build whatever you like on Vladimir after you bought the core items. You could even build tank items, to be honest. So this is, in case you need a Void Staff early, this is the build. If you don't need a Void Staff early, I would go typically with Cosmic Riftmaker into Death Cap. However, if I do have the economy, so even though I don't need a Void Staff early, and I do have like the gold to the economy to build a Death Cap early, I would still buy it as a second item, then go Riftmaker, then go Void. But typically you don't have the gold to build a Death Cap instantly, and then Riftmaker is a little bit better because the build path is easier. Then you go Death Cap, then you go Void. But again, if you need Void Staff earlier, you go Void as a third item, Death Cap as a second item. Alright, with that being said, let's move on to the next build, and that's going to be our double flat penetration build. So both Storm Surge and Shadow Flame. Now, I don't see many people go this build, but it's an amazing build if you build it in the right team comp. So, when would you build this? Very simple, actually. So if you play against enemies that have very low MR, so let's say you are the only AP champion on your team, then enemies don't necessarily have a lot of reason to stack magic resist because you're the only person that builds MR that has AP on your team. So if they have low MR, flat penetration is extremely valuable to build into those people. So then going full flat penetration, Sorcery's Use, Storm Surge, Shadow Flame, that's full flat penetration is amazing. Now, on top of that, I typically would only build Shadow Flame if, on top of them having low MR, they're also low health. Because if they have like low MR, but they have a lot of like max health, like a Cassiopeia with like Rod of Ages or something, or a Rise with Rod of Ages, then I would probably still not go Shadow Flame because it's going to be hard for you to proc the passive on the Shadow Flame to make your abilities or the damage on your abilities crit, right? So this is only really good if they're both, if the enemy team comp is both low maximum health and low magic resist. Then this is an absolute amazing build. Now, of course, if they start building magic resist because you're fat or something, you can still include a Void Staff here at the end, but typically I would go with something a little bit more ability haste oriented, like a Riftmaker again, or a Zhonya's. Because in this build, the only thing that you will lack is ability haste. Now, typically you don't need ability haste, because you're gonna one-tap people in one go, that's why we go this build. But if you really wanted to have some ability haste, some extra, you could argue that you could say, okay, I'm gonna go Ionian Boots into double pen. Now we still have a lot of flat penetration, but we also have some extra ability haste from the boots. Now for me, the extra ability haste from the boots, it's only 10 ability haste, so for me it's like too insignificant to build it. And also, when you build flat penetration, flat magic penetration, the more you have of it, increasingly, like exponentially, the better it becomes, the more useful it becomes. That's why I would still go Sorks. Now if you go this build, again, you could go in your runes, something like Transcendence plus Legend Haste, to make sure that you have as much ability haste as possible from your runes, so that you can really go this build. Alright, that's it for this build. Let's go to the other build. Now, what if we are playing against an enemy team comp that has low magic resist, so we are like the solo AP champion on our team, but they do have high AP. So I just told you I wouldn't go the previous build here, the double, it's like Storm Surge plus Shadow Flame, if the enemies, even if they have no MR, but if they have like a lot of HP, like a Rise or a Cassiopeia, or let's say a Sion who's building armor, right? He still has a lot of HP, or like a Cho'Gath. So these people are still going to be difficult to kill, and your Shadow Flame won't crit against them because you won't get them below like 40 or 35% HP. It's 40%, I think, yeah. So then this build is going to be a lot better in my opinion. So what we're going to do is we're going to go Sorks into, you could choose which direction you want to go here. So you could go Sorks into a Storm Surge for like early game, like having a lot of damage and also movement speed. And then here we go Cosmic Drive to make sure that we have some ability haste to get off extra ability rotation against those people with more HP, which is going to be a lot more useful than the Shadow Flame who wouldn't crit or that wouldn't crit in the first place. Now, the order in which you want to buy this, it's personal preference. I like having ability haste early on in the lane because it makes you so much, it makes it so much easier for you to play the lane. Your W is on a lower cooldown. You have more Q, so more sustain. So then if I could really choose, I would prefer going Cosmic Drive into Storm Surge rather than going Storm Surge into Cosmic Drive. So this would be my preferred build path. And yeah, that would be what I would be going. Then, of course, you could finish off the build with a death cap. If at any point the enemies do start building magic resist, you could always still include a void staff. Otherwise, again, I would go with Sonya's for survivability. Or if I don't need survivability, if I don't need percentage pen, my go-to item will always be Riftmaker because it's such a good item on Vladimir. Alright, with that being said, let's move on to another build. So this build is very similar to the standard build here, right? It's very similar. And it's basically what I already talked about. So when the enemy team, or like when we have a lot of AP on our team, right? The enemies are going to stack magic resist. Therefore, because the enemies will stack magic resist, we will typically need our void staff early on in the game. That means we're going to need it as a third item. So then actually I would like to go Storks into Cosmic Drive, you could go a Riftmaker, but again, I would probably prefer going Death Cap, and then Void Staff, and then going Riftmaker. This is basically this is the alternative of the standard build, because in my eyes, the standard build is this, when you don't need a Void Staff early on. So this would be the standard build, Cosmic Drive, Riftmaker, Death Cap. And then when you do need a Void Staff early on, I would swap out my Riftmaker for a Death Cap on a second item, because otherwise our Death Cap is our fourth item, and once again, I don't like that. It's such a big power spike, I don't want to keep it until my fourth item. So that's why I would just do this. In this case, I would go this build. When the enemies will stack magic resist, I need a void early on, and then I would go Cosmic second item. So this is like an alternative standard build. Alright, now let's move on to some tankier builds, right? And this build is actually very interesting. So here, what are we going to do? If the enemy team is very tanky and they have like a lot of max HP champions. So let's say they have a Scion, they have an Amumu or a Cho'Gath, or, you know, like those high max HP enemy champions. Like a Swain or something in the mid lane, or, you know, like, you know, all the champions with a lot of max HP. In those games, specifically like tanky champions or bruiser champions are typically melee or like short ranged. So then in those comps, it would be really nice to build a Riftmaker because the fights are going to last long. So you're going to be able to utilize your Riftmaker a lot. Liandry's is going to be amazing because again, max health damage versus teams with high max health is going to be amazing. Then you could go with Death Cap or a Void depending on the situation. If they have a lot of max health and they are also stacking magic resist pretty early on, you could go a Void and then go Death Cap. This would be completely fine. Now, typically, like they can either choose. They can either stack magic resist or like HP, right? So then if they stack a lot of HP, I don't feel like you necessarily need a Void Staff early on. So you could go Death Cap as a third item and then Void Staff as a fourth item. Then again, if you need even more ability haste, you could finish this build off with a Cosmic Drive or a Zonya's for some sustainability, etc. Now, if you play versus a team comp where the enemies are, let's say, they are tanky, but they're like bruiser tanky. They're like not tanky. For example, a Cho'Gath has like an insane amount of HP, right? So Liandry's is really good against a Cho'Gath or a Scion, like those champions with like an insane amount of HP. But what if they don't have that? What if they just have like bruiser type champions, like let's say a Silas. A Silas is like not squishy if he goes like the Conqueror Cosmic Drive build. He's not going to be squishy, but he's also not necessarily tanky. He's just a bruiser. So at that point, you're not going to get that much value from a Liandry's. So then I feel like you could just swap out your Liandry's for a Cosmic Drive So we remove Liandry's and we replace Liandry's with a Cosmic Drive. And then I feel like this would be the better setup. Now, why do I mention this? Liandry's is typically only really good on champions that have either a high range and also typically like low ability cooldowns. And the reason for that is, Liandry's is constant damage. So if you can constantly damage your opponent, that's really good. Vladimir is quite short ranged, so it's difficult to constantly attack enemies. And also you have relatively high cooldowns. So that's another reason why it's also a little bit harder to constantly proc your Liandry's burn. That's why Cosmic Drive is really efficiently on you. So if they don't have that many like max health champions, then I would just go Cosmic Drive. But otherwise, again, I would go a Liandry's here in this build. So then I would do something like this. Now, are there other builds viable on Vladimir or other items? Yes, I believe even tank items on Vladimir are completely fine. If you have like a lot of AP in your team and the enemy team has a lot of like AP champions, I feel like Abyssal Mask is something you could definitely go. You could even build items like a Frozen Heart on Vladimir. I've tried it where I go like this Riftmaker. So I've tried this tanky build, which is really, really fun. So like in Riftmaker, I go Riftmaker, Abyssal Mask, Frozen Heart, something like that. And then I start building some more AP, right? Then I start building, you could build something like a Liandry's, or if you, even a Death Cap if you have the economy for it. So you can really start building whatever you want. You could even build a Bloodletter's Curse. And this is more like a really tanky, but fun and strong alternative for Vladimir. It's like you're not going to get one tapped, you will survive a long time. And since you still have a lot of AP, because this gives you extra AP damage, Riftmaker gives you AP. It's very gold efficient on Vladimir as well. And then Bloodletter's Curse also gives you AP. You're actually really, really strong and tanky at the same time. So builds like this are also completely viable. Are they optimal? I'm not sure about that, but they're definitely viable. That's why I don't necessarily mention it, so I'm going to remove it here. In this guide is where typically I just want to talk about the optimal builds, and these are in my mind the most optimal builds for all the cases that we talked about. Alright guys, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the sums that you would like to go on Vladimir. So first and foremost, this one is quite easy, because in 90% of your games, even if you really want to in 100% of your games, you can just go Ghost and Flash. Again, you're short-ranged, you're very strong in teamfights with all your AoE damage, but you're short-ranged and immobile. So even if you're full build and you have like lots of damage, it's still all about like how easily can you do that damage to the enemy team. You might be very strong, but can you even get onto them, right? So then having those sums like Ghost with Flash, it makes you so strong and so mobile for those team fights that yes, you actually have an easy time dealing that damage to the enemy team. That's why typically you can just go Ghost Flash and it's really good. Now Ghost is also really useful in lane. The thing is, you just don't use it that often typically because it's more of like a team fight oriented rune. But of course you can use it to get like a cheeky red Q off onto your opponent, fix your lane. If you're in a bad spot, just do like a Ghost into ult E red Q, get them low. Now you got some pressure off of you and you're chilling in the lane. So you can definitely also use it there quite creatively. But it's of course mainly for those late game and mid game team fights. Now, are there any other setups that you could go? Yes, lately I have been considering going Teleport, right? Because there are some very hard matchups for Vladimir, like a Syndra, right? Or an Orianna. And if you go Teleport, your laning phase would actually be a lot easier. Because of course, you have more sustain. If you're in a bad spot, you can just recall and teleport back to lane. So your laning phase would be a lot easier. Also, your side laning. So Vladimir is also like the side laning in League of Legends, specifically in Season 15, is very important in my opinion. In the sense that it's even more important that you win the side lane than that you win the lane. So for example, I don't really mind if I play versus a Syndra and I struggle in the lane, as long as I win the side lane, right? So maybe going Ghost Flash into Syndra is still fine because Ghost really allows you to outplay her in the side lane later on in the game. And if you have pressure in the side lane, you can pressure the enemy map, like the map, a lot better, so it gives more prio to your team. Now, Teleport on Vladimir is also really useful in those side lanes, what we're talking about here, right? Because the hardest part on Vladimir is the macro in the mid game, because you need to farm, but you also need to join team fights. Now, if you don't go Teleport, but you're side laning against a Syndra with Teleport, she can just teleport to a fight and you can't get there in time. So you have to typically make a choice. Do I instantly go mid and maybe give up some pressure in the side lane and let the Syndra kill my turret and just expect there's going to be a fight in the mid lane? Or do I go to the side lane, risking that Syndra might just teleport to a fight, and then if I want to go there, I'm going to arrive late to the fight, or I'm just going to have to stay bot lane and keep on farming and just not be at the fight. So not having teleport really makes it harder for you to join the fights, but then when you're in the fights, if you have teleport, you're going to be a lot weaker because you won't have the Ghost Flash combo. So you see, that's where the difficulty lies with Vladimir. That's something I'm still working on myself. Currently, I almost always go Ghost Flash combo, but I feel like right now, specifically like if you go a little bit more into the higher elos, I feel like teleport can be useful in certain matchups when you're playing against a Syndra or an Orianna. Now, then, do you go Flash teleport? Do you go Ghost teleport? At that point, it would be personal preference. Does the enemy team have a spell that you need to like Flash or something? Like I would say if I'm laning versus a Syndra in the side lane, I don't need Flash. It's not like I can easily Flash her E or something, right? It's a lot better if I just go Ghost. I can pull her E. So if I go Ghost, so I pull her E, then I go Ghost, I can just run her down, so I don't need to Flash in this. So that if I were to go teleport into the Syndra matchup, I would probably go Ghost teleport over Flash teleport. But there are games where you're gonna need Flash to flash a certain spell, for example, right? That you can't just W or whatever. Like think of a Jarvan ult, for example. If they have like a Yorick and a Jarvan, you can't Ghost or pull out of a Yorick cage. You can't Ghost or pull out of a Jarvan ult. So then having Flash in those team comps are really good. So if you play versus a Syndra in the mid lane, and they have like Yorick Jarvan as jungle and top, you could perhaps go Flash teleport, right? But again, it's all personal preference, what works the best for you. I haven't experimented too much about it with it. I almost always just go Flash Ghost, but again, you could pick up teleport. And then for the last one, Ignite, you can definitely go Ignite. I typically go it in matchups where I know I can win. So into a Sylas or something where there's going to be a lot of fist fighting early on, and Ignite really makes the difference. Also, when I play Vladimir in the top lane, I really like Ignite into certain matchups, like against a Yone top lane or something, or against the Garen, because it really makes it so much easier to outplay those people if you have Ignite. And then I would go typically Flash Ignite. You could go Ghost Ignite, but I'm a big fan of Flash right now, so I would go Flash Ignite. It gives you a bit more outplay potential as well. Like for example, in team fights, generally speaking, Flash is better because Ghost, yeah, it's a bit harder, you know, like you can't just flash over a wall and flank people, like get onto the enemy, Fed Draven or something, right? Ghost is going to make it a little bit harder to do that. So in a Flash is typically a bit better in a team fight, whereas I like both of them. But that's why I typically go Flash Ignite. It gives you a bit more outplay potential than when you were to go Ghost Ignite. So what setups could you go? A summary, typically just Flash Ghost for the mobility. It's like in 90% of the games you could go this. If you're in a very hard matchup like Orianna, Syndra, those type of matchups, you can definitely go teleport. And then you can combine it with either Flash or Ghost, depending on the game, depending on your personal preference. And if you're in the fistfight heavy matchup, like a Sylas in the mid lane or an Irelia, or maybe in the top lane, you're playing versus something like a Yone or a Garen, like matchups where you can really solo kill them if you have Ignite, you can go Ignite with Flash. Right. That is it about summoner spells. And now let's move on to the next part of this guide. Obviously, we'll use our Q to poke our enemies and heal ourselves. Now, poking someone with Q is easier said than done. Think of playing versus a long-range champion like Syndra. In matchups like this, we can use some tricks to hit people with our Q though. First, we should look to Q enemies when they're going to last hit one of our minions. Alright, so here I'm going to show you guys a perfect example of what I mean when you need to pressure your enemies, basically when they're going for minions. So this is a beautiful example. So we're going to see here. Look, these red minions here, Syndra tried to farm it, right? And she did with her Q. And now look what I can do. We can get a few free Q off of her. Just because she went for a minion. That's how you pressure your opponents. Whenever they want to walk up to your minions and last hit them, you have a free angle to Q her, even though she has more range than you. And that's simply because when she wants to last hit a minion, she has to stand still. While she's standing still, you have time to catch up to her, and now you get a free Q. Second, we should use our red Q movement speed to gap close the distance between us and our opponent to make sure that our Q hits. Okay, so here we have a beautiful example of what it looks like to use your red Q movement speed to get a free empowered Q onto your opponent basically. So let's go take a look. So look here how I can only get the red Q off onto Syndra because of my empowered movement speed. The Syndra in this case wasn't paying too much attention to my red Q timing, I guess, or maybe she forgot about the extra movement speed I get. Now keep in mind this was, I believe, a 350 LP Master Syndra, and this is how you can consistently poke enemies like this just with a simple strategy of just basically using the extra movement speed of your red Q to make sure that you can also hit your opponents. Third, we can bait the enemy into thinking that we're about to use our Q on a minion, but instead we last hit the minion with an auto attack, and then we still have our Q to hit our opponent. Alright, so now I'm going to show you what it looks like to make your opponent think that you're going to Q a minion, but then actually last hitting it with auto attacks and using your Q on your opponent. So take a look at this trait here. So the Syndra here, again, 350 LP Master Syndra walks up because she's probably like sure that I'm gonna Q this minion. Why? Many Vladimirs do. Many Vladimir players use their Q to farm, but then you wouldn't have your Q anymore to trade. So we just simply auto-attack the minion, and now we still have Q. And boom, there we go, we just win the trade. Which is so good here, because keep in mind guys, getting your Q, like using your Q on an opponent, is in theory simple, but once you play versus people like this Syndra, you might think, isn't it a lot more difficult? Well, basically, if you just use these tricks like you can see, it's not that much more difficult. It's just, you have to know about these tricks, and you have to be able to consistently use them. Fourth, we can wiggle back and forth to make the enemy overstep. Alright, so this is actually one of my favorite tricks. So look what Lux has done here. She has binded me, and my red Q is about to come up, so I want to start chasing Lux the moment this bind is over, right? Because my red Q is coming up, it's going to give me a lot of healing, and I will deal a lot of damage to Lux. See what's going to happen here. So look. I walk up, and you see how Lux is walking away? So I'm not in range right now. I cannot go in range of Lux. So what do I start doing here? I start turning my character model the other way around with the intention of, if Lux also follows that pattern, if she thinks, okay, Vladimir is turning around again, so I can walk up again, I'm instantly going to turn back. And I have this idea in my mind, and the Lux doesn't. So my reaction time will be quicker than her reaction time, because I'm expecting to do this, she's not expecting me to do this. Obviously, a very good player might also know that I'm going to do this. But even in high elo, this really works really well. So look what I'm going to do here. So look, I walk back. Lux is going to walk up here again. Why? She saw my character model walk away. So now she thinks I can walk up again. But look, I'm already turned again. And by the time she can react, I already have a red Q here. Right? And that's this concept. This works in low elo, it works in high elo, and it's one of my most favorite tricks in League of Legends, and specifically on Vladimir. All we do is we basically abuse the fact that we can have quicker reaction time than our opponents to close the gap between us and our opponents by making sure we have an intention in our mind. We're planning on doing something, they don't know that, so their reaction time is going to be slower than our reaction time. That's all there is to it. Okay, so for the next concept, I basically want to go back to this clip here, a clip that we already looked at, and we're going to look at it from a different perspective, or basically we're going to add something to it. So take a look here. If you remember correctly, why will we be able to Q the Syndra here? Well, it's because of the minion. You can see the minion here. This is the one she wants to farm. It's very low, so we said, hey, we need to pressure our opponent when they want to last hit. That's a good way for us to do a Q, right? But there's a difference between queuing somebody and like knowing how to, like when to queue somebody, basically like when you're pressuring them when they want to go for minions. But you can also think about, how will I queue them? Like, when will I actually do it? So here, look, we're already in the position to queue her. Right now I can queue her. But look, I wait until she hits me with her spell, and now I'm going to queue her. The reason for that is, I know that even if I walk up there, Syndra can cast her Q while she's walking. So I know I'm going to take damage. So I might as well wait until she hits me with the spell, and then do the Q, so that the damage that she did to me, I already heal part of it back. And that way I basically guarantee that I win this trade here. Right. So that's all there is to it. Okay guys, so this is another very useful concept that actually a lot of people forget about when they play Vladimir. So right now, if you pay attention, I have 1 Q stack. My bar here is white, so that means I have 1 Q stack. What does that imply? That implies if I Q Lee Sin right now, then my next, while I do that Q, I get off the Q, then my next red empowered Q is about to come up, right? So what is Lee Sin doing here? A little bit of context. I'm playing versus Lux. Lee Sin ganked me. Now I could let this Lee Sin just go and say, okay, Lee Sin, it's fine. You ganked me, didn't work out. I will let you get back to farming. I will let you get back to ganking, whatever. I don't want to do that. Lee Sin is an early game jungler. I want to keep him here as long as possible, obviously without him getting anything. I don't want to die here. I want to just keep him busy so he can't really do anything, because his champion is on a timer. He needs to get something done in the early stages of the game. Now I know I can fight Lee Sin here. Why? Because I have 1 Q stack. If I Q him right now, my red Q is about to come up. So let's take a look at what happens here. So look. So I Q Lee Sin, and now my empowered Q is already about to come up. So if you know you're about to take an extended trade with somebody, because there's a high risk that Lee Sin re-engages here onto me, if you know that you're about to take a long extended trade with somebody, make sure that you're sitting on 1 Q stack, because a long trade typically means you're going to get 2 Qs off, and then you will be able to get a red empowered Q off. So here we already get 1 Q off. Lee Sin engages. I try to dodge, but he does hit me, but it doesn't matter so much, because you're going to see, look, my next Q is a red Q. So what happens here? Look, I get a full red Q. The only thing I could have done better here is potentially wait until Lee Sin's shield is over, but I didn't want to wait too long in case Lux wanted to hit me with abilities and maybe kill me. So I wanted to have the instant healing, so I red Q through his shield. But you see how low Lee Sin is actually going to be here. He's going to keep on chasing me. He cannot kill me. Why? We got the red Q healing, and we did a lot of damage to him. So now Lee Sin here is really, really low. He can't just randomly move to bot lane and gang him now. He's too low to do that. And if my jungler wants, he can potentially invade Lee Sin. So I kept him busy, but what was the underlying concept here? The underlying concept was, if you're planning on taking an extended trade, make sure that you start a trade on 1 Q stack, and then you're going to be able to get a red empowered Q off on your next Q. And last but not least, something about your Q healing. So you can use Q on minions to heal between trades, but it's even better to use your empowered Q on jungle camps like the Raptor camp to get extra healing. Now let's take a look at our W. Vladimir's W is his only defensive tool, and it has a very high cooldown timer. So whenever you're planning on using it, you need to assess the map to make sure you're not getting ganked by someone on the enemy team. As a defensive tool, we can use our W for dodging crucial enemy abilities, such as Ahri charms, Twisted Fate's gold card, etc. Now, when you're using your W to dodge an enemy's crucial ability, you will lose HP as your W costs you HP. But keep in mind, if you W underneath an enemy champion or minions or jungle camps or both, you'll heal back a lot of HP. Alright, so now we're going to look at our W healing, or the way you basically have to use it. So whenever you basically try to use your W, it's going to cost you quite a lot of HP. So what you want to do, you want to get the HP cost, you want to heal it back. Now, a lot of people don't actually know this, your W does heal you a lot. Especially it heals you when you're underneath a target, like an enemy, a jungle camp, or minions. And a nice application of that is here, this is me, I'm the Vladimir, this is my enemy, the Tahm Kench, and this is my jungler Lee Sin. Now Lee Sin is ganking me, and this is still a very difficult kill on the Tahm Kench. So look what happens here. I'm about to get very, very low. I use my ultimate, I heal up, but I'm still quite low. So look what I do. I W here, and I go on the wave here, and look how much I heal from the wave actually. I heal a significant amount. And now I can move back here to the Tahm Kench, use my red Q, and there we go. Right, here you're gonna see it, the red Q, and ultimately we're going to take this kill here. Right? But that's a nice showcase of how you can use your W. You can use it to dodge crucial abilities, or if they already did their crucial abilities, you can use your W on the wave for sustain. Right? In an ideal situation, you dodge and a crucial ability of an opponent, and in the meantime you W underneath an entire minion wave with the enemy, but that's not always possible. So it's just whenever like there is an option for you to heal with your pool, or whenever there's a way to sustain for you with your pool, try and do it. Try to negate the HP cost of your pool by going underneath targets, jungle camps, monsters, champions, etc. Additionally, you can also use your W just for wave clear. For example, when you're not under any threat of getting ganked, or when you need to push the wave really quickly before you recall. Now believe it or not, but your W has even more use cases. W can be used for movement speed when we're looking to all-in someone. On top of that, not only can it be used for movement speed, but also to slow enemies. Alright, so for the next concept we're basically going to talk about how useful Vladimir's W slow is. Because if you activate W, you yourself become a lot faster, but you do slow enemies that are on top of you basically. And this could be useful in many use cases actually, but let's take a look at this one here. So look, I'm chasing the Kai'Sa here. And okay, they engage onto me, so I pull, but the main reason is, look, Kai'Sa can literally not move. She is turbo slowed, she literally cannot escape. And now here you might say, well, it doesn't really matter because you just one-tap her anyway, but there are many use cases here. Like first of all, here she couldn't get away because of the slow, but there are also use cases where you can't kill your opponent, but where you basically just like ghost and you activate your pull onto an opponent, so maybe your Amumu jungle can catch up and hit his Q onto the opponent, right? So keep in mind that your W, and I use this so much more than you might think, it's actually a peel item as well. It's like a peel tool. You can slow enemies to make sure that your opponent, like your teammates, can get onto them, right? So you're basically like more of a support in that way, right? And Vladimir doesn't have too many like interactions like that where he can be of use to his team in another way than damage. So this is a very important one, so keep it in mind. And obviously your W can be used for turret diving, but it's often better to tank a turret shot and not use your W so that you're still safe from any threat. And last but not least, you can slow down your empowered Q drainage while using W. Your E is actually pretty simple, but I'm quickly going to go over it. So, if you press E, you lose HP. So you need to make sure, especially in the early game, you can't really afford to lose HP. So you need to make sure that if you lose HP, you get a lot of value out of it. There's two ways to get a lot of value out of your E. Either one, for wave management, for wave clear, or two, for a very good trade. What is a very good trade? If you charge your E at your opponent and you lose HP, and now they also get to damage you, you're never going to win the trade. So a good trade would be, like when you use your E, would be when your opponent doesn't really have cooldowns. You play versus an Ahri, she doesn't have her E, she doesn't have her Q, she doesn't have her W. Now you can obviously walk up for a free trade, and she will not be able to win the trade with her auto attacks versus your E damage. Then it would be good to do E. Another reason why it would be good to do E is wave clear. Many mages like Orianna, Syndra will typically look to push the wave early on onto you. And that's annoying for you. But what you can do is you can look to temporarily freeze the wave or slow their push down to keep them as long as possible on your side of the lane. You can do that by trimming their wave with your E. Basically trying to hit the entire wave with a full charged E. That way it would be worth to lose some HP because you did hit the entire wave, you did trim the wave, and that will make it a lot easier for you to hold the wave here in this position, which is a good position for you and a weird position for the enemy team because they can easily get ganked by your jungler. Right? So then another thing is with your E you can slow down your Q drainage. So let me show you. Look, I can slow this down. And that's the same for your W. I didn't show you guys. I did mention it, but I'm going to show you guys now as well. So look, also with my pool, I can slow this bar down. Right. So both with my pool and both with my E, I can slow down the Q drainage. Now, for me, the most fun use case for E is trying to kill people with it. So typically, if your opponent is low, you could charge E and randomly flash onto them and then surprise them. And this works really well, I would say, up until like Diamond or Master. But once you start getting to the higher elos, it won't work as good. Because what's going to happen is you do this and you flash, they're just going to follow up with a flash. So it's not really going to work. They're going to predict it easily. So you kind of have to bait their flashes. Whenever they're overextended, then you do this and you act like you're going to flash by just doing E and walking up to them. You act like you're going to flash. And that might actually bait out their flashes. Now, if they're really good, they don't really have to anticipate the fact that you're going to flash. They can just react to it.
right? So if you do this, they might not flash. They will wait until you flash and then they flash. Some people just rely that much on their mechanics, and they can because they're good at it. So then I have another trick for you guys. You can play around with your E. You can wiggle back and forth. So you act like you're going to walk up, you walk back like you're going to stop, and you walk up again. So here I walk up, I walk back, and then I flash anyway onto them. So basically what I do is this. Let's assume that I have E right now. I walk up with my E, they think I'm going to flash or they think I'm going to go onto them. I walk back, I show them that I have no intention, so they walk up again, and then I flash and I hit them with my E, right? They are surprised. It's basically the same concept that I mentioned before. But so look, this is what it looks like. I'm going to show you guys one more time. So you act like you want to walk up, and boom, right? So once more, you act like you walk up, you go back, and you flash. Right? They don't expect it. They see you walk up, they walk back, they see you walk back again, and they think, oh, we're safe. He's not going to flash. They walk up, and boom, you surprise them with a flash. So as simple as this, right? And it's a really fun trick. I use it a lot. You can surprise people a lot with it, but it's mainly for high elo and lower elos. People don't really react that well, and then you can just get away with just the standard E into flash. And last but not least, let's take a look at Vladimir's ultimate before we move on to the combined combos. Vladimir's ult is mainly used for dealing great AoE damage when all-inning the enemy team at big team fights or to kill your lane opponent. However, oftentimes, especially in higher elos, you might find yourself having trouble with killing your lane opponent. And then what I like to do is simply to use your ult to get a favorable trade that gives me the dominant position in the lane, so that I can mainly prevent my opponent from impacting the game. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys the perfect example of what it means to ult your way to lane dominance. So here I was playing Vladimir versus LeBlanc. I struggled versus the LeBlanc. I really couldn't kill her, she was playing way too safe. But then I remembered I'm playing Vladimir. I'm a scaling champion versus LeBlanc, an early to mid game champion. I outscale her towards the late game. So as long as she doesn't really impact the map, as long as she doesn't really kill my top lane or my bot lane or my jungler, I'm fine. So all I have to do is keep her in lane, and preferably I control the lane. Preferably I get to farm, I get to take place, and she doesn't. So here I said, even though I can't kill her, I'm just going to preemptively ult her. I'm just going to ult her and do a lot of damage to her so that I win the trade and I get prio over the lane in the next couple of minutes here. And let's see what that means. So here, LeBlanc is going to jump onto me. I'm going to do this in slow motion here so you guys see it clearly. So LeBlanc jumps onto me. I'm going to follow up here with ultimate, like I'm going to do ult, release E and Q. And now look who's going to win this trade. Look at her HP here. She's going to be really, really low. We procced her passive. She's going to be really, really low. And look how healthy we are. So this amount of HP versus this amount of HP, we are obviously winning the trade right now. We are winning the lane right now. And that's all it means to really ult your way to lane dominance. If you can't kill her, just keep her low. And oftentimes you'll find yourself getting a kill on your opponent, which is kind of funny because you basically ulted them because you couldn't kill them in the first place. But when people get low, they tend to overstay in the lane, and then you can kill them anyway afterwards. But that's not really, that's fun, but that's not really the initial idea here. The initial idea is ult LeBlanc, get her low, so we win the trade and we get lane prio right now. And that's how you win the game. You can also use your ultimate for wave clear when you quickly need to shove in a wave, especially during the early lane phase, but after the recent Vladimir buffs, we now have more wave clear with our W, so there's less use cases for wave clear with our ultimate. And lastly, your ultimate is a very powerful tool for surviving or even turning ganks. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys how you could use your ult to survive ganks as well. A lot of people don't really think about it this way, but it's super useful. So let me show you. So here I'm getting ganked by Master D. Now notice I'm not just ulting him instantly, he's also super fat, he does a lot of damage. But look, I wait until Zoe is getting close to Master E, and then when they're close enough, now I'm going to ult. Why? You get obviously more healing when you hit 2 people than 1 person. So, look. Master E goes on to me, he has to back out, Zoe goes on to me, and I'm going to live here simply because of my ultimate healing. And now I do a red Q, I decide to annoy them a little bit, right? Here I get my ultimate healing, and now we live basically, right? So look how I can like easily survive this. Wasn't even that close. I could easily survive this by making sure that I have future guaranteed insane healing. By ulting when they're both low and I still don't need my ult, I know I'm about to get healing in the future, right? When my ult pops, And it's going to be a lot because I hit both of them. So I can basically survive easily. I can maybe poke them a little bit and all of that. So it's a really good tool basically to survive ganks using your ultimate like that. Alright, let's move on to the non-ultimate ability combos. First up, the standard QEW combo. Okay, so I'm going to start with the QEW combo. Now, why will I start with this combo? Because it's your main bread and butter combo, especially during the laning phase or in any 1v1 situation. Because typically what you want to do, you want to deal damage to your opponent, right? Your E is very good at that, while being untargetable yourself, and therefore you need your W. So what are you typically going to do to trade with your opponent? EW, right? I deal damage, he can't damage me. The only thing that you can add to that is your Q, because we're talking about non-ultimate abilities right now, so we're just talking about the normal abilities. The only thing you can add to that is the Q, which would be Q, EW. Now, the reason why I do QEW and not EWQ, so for example, I could also do this, EQW, all of that, but I'm not choosing to do that, and there's a reason for that. The reason why is, while you go in pull, you're untargetable, but your abilities could also come back on cooldown again. For example, if I do Q right now, well, 3-second cooldown, I am vulnerable, right? If I do Q and I go in pull, look, the cooldown is already getting lower. So now I only have to wait 2 seconds anymore and I can Q again. That's why it's super important that if you do this combo, especially in a 1v1 situation, that you do Q before EW. Right? Now, it might be a bit greedy. Sometimes you can't get away with this. For example, let's say you trade with an Ahri. Right? This is an Ahri and she wants to charm. And you want to get off your Q right now, but the moment you want to Q, she hits charm. So you're instantly going to have to do this. And then Q afterwards. So you're only going to get off 1 Q. Whereas if you're lucky and maybe you dodge the charm, or she misses the charm, or she gives you more time to Q before she can charm, then you can do Q, EW, and then when you're out of pull, you can Q again. But that's the main combo. Also keep in mind that EW really slows enemies, right? Your W slows them a lot, your E will slow them a lot when it pops, and you gain movement speed, so it's super useful to stick onto enemies. When they're running away, they basically can't escape, and that means you can kill them afterwards because they can't run away, or maybe your teammates can catch up to you because you're slowing the opponent, basically. Now, another combo that we can do is actually the QW combo, and this is, I would say, quite niche. Not a lot of people use it, and it's basically to cancel the Q animation. So look, if I Q, you see this entire animation, right? It takes time to do the Q. Now, if you do QW, you don't see the Q animation, right? So you cancel your own animation, which means you can basically instantly like get onto your opponent, you can pull your untargetable, but it's quite niche. Like I said, typically you don't want to do that. Typically you want to do QEW, right? And that doesn't work, right? You can't cancel your Q animation then. So QEW doesn't work if you do it this fast, right? So what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to Q and then EW, and yes, your Q animation will go off, but that's the main combo that you do. That's why QW, this is not really used often. Now, when is it used? Well, obviously when you're when you're super low and in a very dangerous situation, and you're like, this guy's super low, you're super low, and you just basically want to kill each other, but it's like super close, you can easily die, so you don't really dare to walk up, so you just do QW and you get out, for example, something like that. Or typically also when you're turret diving. When you're turret diving, especially in the early game, and I want to hit this guy, right? He's like half HP and I want to get him lower so that I can eventually turret dive him. I might take like do this and not take a turret shot. Now I poked him, not take a turret shot. Now typically it's not worth to pull for a normal Q. Typically it has to be a red Q, right? So if you do a red Q, then typically you could do this. So this, right? This is what it looks like. Now again, in the very early stages of the game, this is a good combo when you want to turret dive. But again, it's very niche. There's not going to be many games where you're going to turret dive level 3, for example, right? But that's when it's pretty good to do the QW combo, because then at level 3, it's not worth to take a turret shot. It's going to cost you so much HP. But once you're like level 6, level 7, it's a lot better to just do this, tank the turret shot, and keep your W. Because now if you get ganked, you still have your W. Or now your opponent can't all-in you because you still have W. You're just a lot safer with it, right? So typically you only want to use W when you know you can't get ganked. And yeah, when it's going to take, like when you're going to block a lot of damage with it. Like I said, level 3 turrets are going to hit, so you might as well pull. But later on in the game, you typically don't want to do this. So it's very niche. It's a very quick combo in very dire situations, very dangerous situations, or in early game when you want to turret dive, for example. All right, and then for the last non-ultimate combo, it would be EQ, right? Now, you can't really do anything wrong with this. It's also very straightforward, this combo. Like, it's just the main damage combo without using your W. So it's like very easy. Keep in mind that when you do the EQ combo, you could E and then cancel your E with your Q. So basically when you charge your E and you Q while charging it, your E will automatically cancel, but it feels really bad, right? It feels super clunky. So instead of, you don't see it on camera, like this is like just automatic. I cancel the E with my Q. What you should do is charge E, release it manually, and then do Q. It's a lot smoother, it feels a lot less clunky, right? You're gonna notice this. I know for a fact that every Vladimir main knows this, but definitely for the new Vladimir players here, very, very important. Release your E manually and then Q, right? So you manually do it and then you Q. Right? So it's just really simple. It's a very simple trick, but it looks super smooth, right? And that's why we do it. It's just a lot smoother. It's not that clunky. Other than that, there's not too many things you need to know about EQ combo. Obviously, you can flash, right, like this. So you can charge E, you flash, and then you Q, right? Again, you flash, you release E manually, and then you do the Q. So again, something like this, right? That's a nice surprise combo, but we already talked about this when we talked about the E, where many people will suspect this combo. So then you're going to have to do this and bait their flash. Or if they don't do this, you're going to have to act like this and then do EQ. Right? But we already talked about that. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the ultimate combos. And the ultimate combos are very interesting. They're obviously what you're aiming for as Vladimir. You want to join team fights, you want to get pentakills. You're going to need your ultimate to do that. Now, the first ultimate combo, I'm going to show it very slowly, is you basically do, like, there's multiple things, but you can do R, Q, and then you go into EW. This one is not used that much, but I'm going to show you why. First of all, you do R, Y, all the damage you do after your R increases, right? So that's your ultimate, right? I'm going to read it here. Vladimir creates a plague, causing its victims to take 10% increased damage from all sources. So whenever you do an ultimate combo, your ultimate should always be first and then your other abilities. Simple as that. So then your other abilities, what is the other combo that we learned? The non-ultimate ability combo is Q, EW. So if your R needs to be first, it's very simple. We literally just do R, Q, EW. Right? There's only one problem with this. Imagine that you go to an opponent and do this. So you R, Q, EW. You might think, well, that's quite smooth. It's quite fast. But look how much time they have. I need to walk to them, press RQ. All this time while I'm pressing RQ, they can actually just like kill me, CC me, exhaust me. So all those things. That's why the Q is maybe not so good. Maybe you just want to do REW. And then you have a lot more time, or they have a lot less time to kill you, right? The Q might be too much time that you stand still or that you're not in pool. And that's all time they can damage you, CC you, exhaust you, things like that. Now, very important to note with this combo is that you can do the Q, so RQEW, you can do it in 1v1 situations. If you're playing in the mid lane or you're playing in the side lane, top or bot, you're side laning against somebody. In the 1v1, it's pretty good because all the extra damage you get off in the 1v1 is quite important. And typically, if you only play versus one person, they might, like, there's not going to be that much CC that can CC you or kill you while you're doing this RQ, right? So you should be fine then with doing the RQEW combo. You should be completely fine in the 1v1 situation in most situations, right? Now, however, let's say you're in a team fight, then it might be pretty weird to do this. Because if you're in a team fight, let me show you. If you're in a team fight, you typically want to do this. You want to do R on everybody and hit your EW. That's the main thing. The only damage you could add to that is a Q. Before you do, so you could do R, Q on one person because it's a single target spell, and then do EW, right? And then you might think, okay, the risk that I'm standing still while hitting this Q on this one target, while I'm doing this, they can just kill me or CC me or exhaust me. So there's a lot of risk involved. And then is it worth the risk? Is it worth hitting one person with one Q and then maybe dying and not hitting all of this? It's just not worth it. So basically, the best combo here for team fights is always REW. It's super quick, you can hit everybody, you're untargetable, and they have very little time to exhaust or kill or CC you before you do this. Like before you go into pool, there's almost no time. And you can obviously do this with Ghost, like you can come from here, you REW, you proc face raise and you're out, for example, right? There's a lot you can do. You can also combine this with Flash. So if you do Flash slowly, it looks like this. You Flash, you REW, right? You can also do it fast, and you can like even Ghost Flash. So for example, you Ghost Flash REW, and there we go. So there's almost no reaction time from this, especially if you do it from over a wall. If you Ghost and then Flash over this wall into REW, there's almost no time. But imagine that you do this. Imagine, so I'm quickly going to teleport myself here. So imagine that you Ghost, you Flash, you R, and now you stand still for a Q, and then you EW. Like, the entire surprise effect is gone. They can just exhaust you or something like that, and then you do 0 damage. Right? So it's super, super important that you don't do the Q before, like in the team fights. Right? You always just do REW. And the Q is just in 1v1 situations. In the 1v1 situation, like this is one target, we can RQEW. Right? That's fine. But that's it about that combo. But keep it in mind, this is the most important combo on Vladimir, in my opinion, the Flash REW combo. It's the most important one. It's for team fights. It's to get pentakills. It's to win the game. Alright, so the following combo will be this combo. So we're going to charge E, do ultimate, release E, and then you can follow up with Q, and if you want to, W. So fast, that would look something like this. So we charge E fully, and then Q, and then perhaps W if you really want to. Right? Now, when would you use this combo? This combo is almost never done without a flash. And the reason for that is, like, people typically will, like, if you start doing this and they know you have ult and they're, like, in kill range, because that's when you would do this combo typically. Like, you would do this when you think you can kill enemies. They would typically just dash out of it or flash out of it. And you can only basically use this in situations where they have no dash, they have no flash, but then typically they wouldn't overextend like this, where you can just hit them with your E and ult. They typically would keep more distance, right? So maybe you can Ghost or Flash that to close the distance. So for example, you could do Ghost. You could charge E, ult, and then Q, and then perhaps W to slow them and keep up with them, right? That's very useful. Now, typically, like I said, it's done with Flash. That would look something like this. So we charge E, we Flash, and we RQ. And then again, you can perhaps follow up with W if you want to. But the main gist of it is we E, we Flash, release R, and then release E, and then Q, right? That's the main combo. This is typically just to blow up somebody in lane, right? This guy is low HP. I'm just acting to farm. I'm acting to trim the wave, and then Flash, boom, RQ, and yeah, we one-tap him, right? Again, same principle. While you do this, people may exhaust you. They might kill you. They might CC you, whatever, right? Or it's also very telegraphed, like especially when you do this in higher elos. Doing this, again, they know you're going to do this. So it's not going to work. So you're going to have to, again, play with them. You're going to have to do this and then do this, right? So again, you're going to have to act like you walk up. They will walk back. You walk back. They walk up again and you flash onto them, right? That's something a lot better. This is a lot better of a combo. So it's basically the same combo, but we just wiggle and we act like we're not going onto them, right? This combo is therefore, right, it's for in lane to kill off people, to surprise them with flash typically. But it's also very good for over walls. So for example, let me put a ward here. Let me place a dummy here, or maybe 2 dummies or 3 dummies, doesn't really matter. But if they, especially if they don't have vision on you, you can basically just E and then flash, and you have like instantaneous damage. If they don't have vision onto you here, who's gonna react? Like you charge and you flash, and only now the damage instantly goes off. So nobody can react to you, right? So it's like, and then you can pull, for example. Right? So the damage instantly goes off. Now, does that mean that you can't do this combo? Right? Well, I didn't do my E here for some reason. Let me see. So REW. You could also do this combo, right? It's also fine. But with this one, you have instantaneous damage. Like, the damage instantaneously procs. Right? So that's the difference. So it's really good to proc instantaneously your damage, but you can only do it like when people don't expect you to. Otherwise, while you're charging your E, they will look to kill you, to CC you, to exhaust you, things like that. And then lastly, or like the last combo here that we have, is basically going to be this very niche one. It's very simply going to be R into Q. That's all it is. So if you do it fast, it's literally just RQ, right? Nothing special to it. And now you might ask, like, when would this ever be possible? Like, why would you use the RQ combo? It's like only using your ult to amplify your Q damage. Why would you do that? Well, it's typically an execute. It's like very niche situation. Like, let's say your E is on cooldown, right? Your opponent is here. He's super low and he's about to kill the last minion to shove it in under your turret. And then he's going to walk away and recall all of that. And you don't have your E. So you can't like E flash onto him with Q or something. You just can't. So then in that case, when your E is on cooldown, they are gonna be here for like just a couple of seconds more maybe. Like not enough for your E to come on cooldown. You might have to flash R, Q. And that might kill him. And then they need to be in a kill range where your Q doesn't kill them, but your empowered Q with your ultimate damage on top of it would kill them. Right? And then super fast would be like something like that. Right? So it's very, very niche. But you can also combine it with your pull. So you can cancel your Q animation. So you could do ult QW, right? So because remember, right? We can cancel our Q animation with our W. So you could also like flash R, Q, W. And then if you do the Q fast and then W fast, then we can cancel the animation. So R, Q, W, right? So this is something that could finish off people as well if you don't have your E, for example. But it's super niche. Typically, we don't do it a lot. But let's say I typically use this also when I'm in a matchup where I just took like a pretty bad trade, or like my opponent is a lot healthier than me and I kind of want to heal up again and I want to get like the prio over the lane. But I just use my E, I use my pull maybe, but I definitely use my E. And now they're healthier than me and I lost a trade and I don't have E. Then sometimes I just RQ and walk away just to like damage them and heal from my Q and heal from my ultimate. And now I might be in HP favor again. I might be the champion with the most HP in the lane again, and I might dominate the lane now, right? So in that situation, I would also use it. But other than that, I don't really use it. Now, something else. The last thing I want to mention here with your ultimate, you can also proc your face rush. So what does face rush say? Hit an enemy champion with 3 spells or attacks in rapid succession to gain a powerful haste. A lot of people think that those spells need to be attack or like damaging spells. The first part of your ult doesn't do any damage, yet you can proc face rush with it. Now you might ask, why would I ever want to proc face rush with my ult? Well, for example, when you're about to get ganked, or when you're getting ganked, or your opponent is running you down, you want to escape. While you're escaping, while you're walking away, people are chunking you, they are dealing damage to you. You want to make sure that by the time you get to your turret, you don't just simply die. So you might ult right now so that while they're attacking you, while you get out your turret and now they might kill you, your healing comes back to you and now you have enough HP to walk away. So ulting quickly, like early in the fight, might be useful to make sure that you don't die and you get to your turret safely. So in those cases, then your ultimate could also be used to proc your face rush and run away even faster. So you ult and then, for example, you EQ and you walk away. But you don't have to ult EQ to walk away. You just need to do 3 spells. So you could just do your ult, E auto attack, ult EW, doesn't really matter. There's all different kind of combos. You can do it without your ultimate, but I'm just saying, if you find yourself in a situation where you need to walk away, and you want to be very quickly away, and for example, you don't have E and W, then the best way for you to proc it might be ult, auto attack Q, and walk away, for example. Right? So it is a niche thing, but it does happen more often than you might think. I would say that I use this whenever I go face rush. I would say I use this at least every game that I go face rush, right? So it's quite interesting actually. But that's going to be the last thing here I wanted to say. Alright guys, now we're going to be looking at the lane phase game plan for Vladimir. We're going to go through 2 games here and just look at the lane phase and see how you can play it. Now I already kind of explained this, but it's probably just better to show you guys. That's why we're going to look at it. And we're going to do 2 different situations. Here we're playing versus Ahri, which is a relatively easy matchup for Vladimir. Now I don't have Ahri Scorch, unfortunately I have Conqueror, and I go in before again they have 3 melees in their team, and Conqueror is also actually pretty fine into Ahri. I do prefer Ahri Scorch, but since Conqueror is that good this game into like team fights, that's why I go it. And it's also decent into Ahri, so that's why I go Conqueror over Ahri Scorch. But typically Ahri is better into Ahri. Now we're going to be looking at the lane phase here just to give you an idea of what to do. Because I told you guys, hey, first and foremost, you want to do two things, right? You want to not die in lane and focus on farming. And then if you do that, your opponent, if they can't kill you, you have good CS, they have only one way to outplay you, and that's by roaming onto the map and getting a lead that way, right? Now, so then the second thing you should do is whenever your opponent wants to roam onto the map, you have to keep them in lane by pressuring them. You could ult them, you could all-in them, just to keep them low so they can't roam onto the map. If you do those two things, you're typically fine. Now that's the very basic fundamental view on Vladimir, and we might actually see that in the second game. In this game, I kind of wanted to show you guys that there's more to it than just that. So if you really want to win games, you also have to punish, just like I told in the beginning of the video, you also have to punish your opponent when they're making a mistake. And that's exactly what you're going to see here in this game. We're going to solo kill the Ahri level 2 or level 3, I think, and you'll see how that happens. So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. We're just focused on farming here, right? We're just focused on farming, but whenever we can get a trade onto Ahri, we will do that. But again, just focus on farming, making sure she can't roam. Of course, we're like level 1 into the game right now, so she can't roam, right? But like if we were like level 6, I would really make sure that she can't roam. I would try to keep her in lane, all those things. So far, we're just focusing on farming and of course, punishing her, which is something a lot of Vladimir players do not do. They just completely focus on farm and they skip the trading. So here, our Ahri obviously walks up when I have my red Q, so of course we're gonna hit it. So on top of farming and focusing on that, we also want to look for trading if our opponent makes mistakes. So here, that's what I'm going to show you in this lane. So again, here we're just farming. We're not really doing anything special. But again, Ahri here, she's looking to walk up. So I'm going to look for a trade if possible. We dodge her Q. Right now, again, she walks up with no Q. She can't trade with us. We get a free Q onto her. Right? That's how she's getting low. Then here, we do W because she can't hit me with anything, right? She doesn't have her E. She has WQ. So if I just W here, I get free damage onto her, look. Right? I get my Conqueror stack stacked. You guys can see that. 5 Conqueror stacks, right? I'm going to keep on auto-attacking her. 6 Conqueror stacks. 7 Conqueror stacks. And now we just flash. We Q. Or you could Q flash to input buffer it. Right? And we just deal an insane amount of damage and we kill her. As a reference, this is high diamond elo. I believe this was a diamond 1 game. So yeah, just to show you, like, it's not like this is like an iron Ahri or something to show you guys, hey, this is how you can play the lane. No, this is relatively decent elo. So yeah, this is how you can play Vladimir, and then you get a solo kill level 2 or level 3 onto an Ahri, right? Now then, from here on out, it becomes simple, right? It's completely fine. We shove out the wave, we recall, we come back to lane, and again, what is our job? To farm minions. Just to farm minions, scale, make sure our opponent can't roam, things like that. And that's just going to be a rinse and repeat. Again, if they walk up and they make a mistake, we just solo kill them. But other than that, look, I'm looking for the trade. She's opening herself up, so I'm looking for the trade. I'm not going to hit her here. It's going to be very close, right? But you see how on top of farming, we're also really focusing on looking to trade with our opponent if possible. But this is going to be a rinse and repeat for the rest of this lane here. So again, look for trading opportunities. As long as I W her E, we get like a good trading opportunity onto her. So that's why we went for that. We try to dodge the E, we try to dodge her Q, we hit her with the E, and then here I try to walk up to get another red Q off. We barely are not in range, so we can't do it. But you see how we play this lane. And that's just going to be a rinse and repeat for this laning phase. It's going to be a bit boring if I just keep on showing this, so it's very simple. Take minions, right? Try to, if possible, hold the wave on your side of the lane. That's what you want to do if possible. So try to hold the wave on your side here. Try to farm as many as many minions as possible. If opponents walk up, look to bully them. Right. Now, of course, you're going to have harder matchups, and that's what we're going to be looking at right now. Alright guys, so now we're going to be looking at a matchup that is a bit harder than the Ahri matchup, and we're talking about the Mel matchup here. Now, I haven't played too much against Mel. This is also one of the first games I played Mel, but this is also not high diamond elo. This is Emerald elo. I think Emerald 2-ish or something like that. So just so that we have a bit of everything, right? The high diamond elo game could serve as more high elo game, and then this one could serve as the lower elo bracket game. To make sure we have a bit of everything in this video. And you're going to see, so I place a ward on the Raptors, we're going to see how this lane plays out There's honestly nothing special here. It's just, yeah, it's a Mel, it's a Vladimir. My setup, if you guys are interested, Ghost Flash because I want to scale. Second wind, because I have Ghost Flash, I go Axiom Arcanist, right? I would just go full scaling and some extra sustain for the laning phase here to make sure we get through this lane consistently. So yeah, there's not really going to be much to talk about this, guys. It's just me farming, and that's something I also want to show. So like in the easier matchup like Ahri, you can just look to like be aggressive, like farm, but also be very aggressive. In a matchup like Mel, it's a lot harder to be aggressive. So then I just look to farm, sit back, relax. I know I outskill her. That's the benefit of Vladimir. Like, as long as you don't die and you make sure your opponent can't roam, you just outskill them, you know, so you don't really have to do a lot. So if possible, I try to keep the wave on my side of the lane. That's why I'm just matching her push typically. I try to keep the wave here on my side of the lane. Try to avoid as much poke as possible. I look for a trade every now and then. You're gonna see that. Like there we got a Q off. If I'm full HP, I like to trade as Vladimir, because then I heal up and my opponents can't really heal up as much as I do because I have like lots of sustain. So then when I'm not full HP, I like to heal up a bit, like to play a bit more passive in these matchups. Farm, focus on that. So yeah. So yeah, so far very boring matchup. It's going to be like this the entire lane. I thought Diana could be here, so I backed off a little bit. I'll walk up again because my Vi is very nearby, right? She's here on the Raptor camp, so I play on this side of the map knowing Diana could be here. She was indeed in our jungle, so she's diving the kill. Not nice for my kill, but it's nice for me because I can play a little bit more aggressive and look to shove this wave in. Or just look to trade a bit with the Mel. But again, very boring. You see, I just focus on farming. I'm really not interested in Mel. I take a trade every now and then. You see, she has very little mana. Because we force her, we bait her into using abilities on us. But then we don't overtrade to the point where we die. We trade to the point where she uses abilities on us, and if possible we dodge them. But Mel abilities are hard to dodge, I feel like. But then if she uses abilities, but like she doesn't hit us with all her abilities, she's gonna run out of mana before we run out of HP. And that's how you typically play in difficult matchups like a Syndra, a Victor, an Orianna, a Mel. Like pre-Lost Chapter, these matchups are all really, really fine. And then after Lost Chapter, they're also typically really fine, because at that point you're almost level 6 or you are already level 6. And then at that point it's quite simple, right? You just all in them. Like, if I'm in a hard matchup, like a Victor or something, and they get once into your all-in range, just all in them. Just throw your full combo onto them, and if they're low, now they have to back off, they have to recall, you have a free lane for a bit, you can farm for a bit, you can put your wave state in a good position, and then you just rinse and repeat that until you're strong enough to all-in them. And believe me, there is a point where you're strong enough to all-in them. Typically, even when you already have like one item, you can typically already do it. But like here, again, it's just boring gameplay, right? It's just boring gameplay. It's just, yeah, there I'm super aggressive limit testing, right? I've never played this matchup. I think it's like the first or the second time. So it's pure limit testing. But again, the main goal is just to farm. We don't have to do all of that. This is just a bit of limit testing to learn the matchup. But here she's getting low on mana. She has like no mana, so I know I'm in like a really good spot right now. Just farming, and that's, you can see what we're doing. Both of us just farming. Yeah, full scaling setup. So if I don't, like, I'm not really focused on trading right now, unless she makes like really big mistakes. Poppy is here, and this is interesting. I'm just going to pressure this. My Karma is nearby, and also Poppy is level 3. Mel has no mana. So even if my Karma is not here, I would always pressure this and always be annoying to them, like try to chunk their HP. Now I go with my Q here onto the Mel accidentally because she walked onto the Poppy. I also didn't think she had mana for her W, but okay. And Diana comes, yeah. We're forced to back out. There is, like, Karma gets off the root, Vi is here, so we can look to go for a kill potentially. But all of these are just shenanigans. I don't really care too much about this. We just want to shove in the wave, recall, go back to lane. That's what we want to do. Okay. And we're just chilling. And again, this matchup is just the same. All we're doing is scaling. If Mel shows any intention to roam, I would love to walk up and just ult her, or look to all-in her, or keep her busy so she doesn't want to roam. That's my game plan right now. I know I outskill her. Specifically, the game is not looking too bad, so I can just chill, farm. If she wants to roam, I can look to pressure her, maybe all in her so she doesn't want to roam anymore. And then we're just chilling. And we keep on doing that over and over and over again. Now, a little side note, if the game would be going very bad, like if I see the enemy team has like a 5-0 Draven, and it's like 5-0 for the enemy team, I would actually consider playing a little bit more aggressive. It's not going to be easy because ultimately you go D-shield, you have like phase trash, right? But I would start playing a bit more aggressive, knowing that the game otherwise might be going like it might be very difficult to win if they have like a 5-0 Draven, if I'm not fed as well. So then I would look to be a bit more aggressive and see what I can do. But right now, if the game is not going like really bad and those scaling matchups, it's fine to just scale. Just outscale your opponent, sit back, relax, farm. That's exactly what we're doing right now. You can see that. So yeah, it's just boring matchups, those matchups, right? Now my karma comes, she gets rooted. And here, again, am I going to kill? I know 100% here that I'm not going to kill Mel with my combo here, right? That's not why I do the combo. I do the combo to get her low and force her out of lane. I know she doesn't have TP, so right now it's good to get her out of lane. She will miss farm. I can maybe take a plate. I can maybe go for a recall. I just have a little bit less pressure onto me right now. And that having less pressure onto you allows you to scale a lot better. So here we're just shoving this in. I look to take a plate. Mel was already here before I could take the plate, unfortunately, but she did miss some CS. So now if you look at the CS, it's not going to be significant, but look, we do have a 6 CS gap on her. And that's significant if you're thinking about it, because we already outscale her. So any CS that we have on top of Mel is just better. Like, it's really good then. But again, same old, just chilling, be vibing. If she wants to roam, I'm going to try and stop her from doing so. If she doesn't want to roam, that's even better for me, right? But typically they would look to roam. They would look to shove and do something. I would just follow them. And again, ult them, all in them, follow them, keep them pressured so they really don't want to move. Also, at around level 7, 8, 9 into the game, let's say minute 8, something around that time, people can really start moving. That's like when most mid laners really start moving and being active on the map. So starting from level 7, 8, 9, around minute 8, that's where typically if I can get a wave prio in a matchup, I like to perma push, get the prio myself, so I'm always in the first position to move. But of course, that's not always possible if you play versus like something like an Anivia, who just out wave clears you, and it's hard to walk up into an Anivia. You can't, right? But if you can, you want to. So here, all of this is just pressure, right? This is just pressuring him, seeing if I can trade with her. I could trade with her, I just didn't W her E. So that's a very bad trade on my behalf. But again, I'm just pressuring her, making sure she doesn't want to roam. Specifically here, Diana is invading my Vi. So I would look to move here. So that's exactly what I do. I look to move. The moment my Vi is, yeah, this is clearly over, I just instantly go back mid. But I wanted to go there, not necessarily to help the Vi, but to really make sure Mel doesn't get anything. Like, I'm okay with Vi dying because of the enemy Diana, but I'm not okay that my Vi would die because of my mid laner. Because I can't control if Vi dies to Diana, right? Typically, I can't control that. I can move, but yeah, of course, in this game, like, I can never get there in time. But I can control if Mel can get there. Because if Mel can get there, I should also be able to get there. In the majority of cases, right? Not always, but in the majority of cases. So I really want to stop Mel from getting something. Now again, here we go for trades. We just looked for some good damage onto her whenever she gives us the opportunity. And it's the same old. We're just chilling, farming, nothing is going on, right? I look to go for an aggressive trade. We dodge her ultimate, we flash forward, she flashes. But none of this really matters because ultimately all I could be doing right now, it's 5-3 for the enemy team. So it's still fine for us. So all I should be doing right now, if I was really like completely locked in and focused, is I could just chill. I shouldn't go for the kill. I shouldn't take an aggressive trade. I can just literally sit here, farm, and I will outscale her. The only reason why I go so aggressive is 1, to limit test and learn the matchup. 2, of course, if you can get a solo kill, it's always better. The quicker you can scale, the better, but you're also not that strong in the early game, so you don't want to risk too much. So this is borderline limit testing, but that's how you learn, right? If you always limit test in the matchups, you're going to learn the trading patterns, you're going to learn how much damage you do, you're going to learn when to kill people, right? And that's how you're going to also learn that on top of playing safe, farming and scaling, how to get solo kills. And that's what really makes up a good Vladimir player. So that's what we're doing. Scaling, farming, trying to make sure she can't out-roam us by pressuring her, moving her, following her, all-inning her if she wants to move. And then seeing if we can get a solo kill if she plays it bad and she walks up. Now we're getting low, so we just recall, come back to lane. We don't want to die, right? Again, if we die to Mel, that's how she outplays us. If we don't die, she's forced to out-roam us to outplay us, and that's a lot more difficult for her. Now, if we don't die and we keep her stuck in lane, she really can't do anything. She's just getting out-skilled then. She's not achieving anything. So that's what I'm trying to do. Really making sure that she can't move. Here we're the first to move. Instantly, I just move. Again, she doesn't, like, if she can't kill me and she can't out-move me, we just win the game. Right. So again here, that's why I instantly move. We're the first ones to move, and because of that, we actually get a kill there. Gonna fast forward this a little bit. Okay. Mal also dies. I die, enemy ADC comes. Unfortunately, like the Vayne comes mid lane, and she is pretty strong. She just kills us. But that's completely fine. Not something that we really have in our control. Was a bit of a weird fight. But again, this is very irrelevant to the mid lane matchup. Again, we just try to do the same. Scale. If we see an opportunity to all in, we go for it. And that's all we do. My Karma dies to the Mel, but hey, it's fine, because Mel is at the very least low. He doesn't have W, so we can just kill her just like that. And you see, that's basically the matchup, guys. I could keep on talking about it, but that's basically the lane phase game plan. Whether you play into an easy champion or into a hard champion, it's kind of the same. In an easy champion, it's just you can typically start pushing earlier, so you will have prio earlier. You can typically turret dive them. You have a lot more pressure on solo kills and getting yourself fed. But it's, of course, very necessary that you do that you do focus on getting solo kills, that you do focus on getting a lead in those easy matchups. Now, something a lot of people don't do is also in the hard matchups like a Mel, you could also say, I'm just going to scale, sit back, relax, and that's also fine. So you have to learn how to do that. You have to learn how to sit back and focus on farming. So your last hitting needs to be good. But also you need to be able to survive the matchup by spacing good, not tanking all the damage, playing around the enemy mana pool, things like that, right? Also, you need to make sure that they don't out-roam you. So if they show any intention of roaming, follow them, ult them, do whatever you need to keep them focused on you and don't let them roam. That's the second part. That way they have very little outplay potential to you. And then the third part, like here where we get the kill onto the Mel, if you can, it's not because you're not supposed to win the matchup, that if they make mistakes, you should still punish them, look to dive them, look to kill them. That's what really makes up a good Vladimir player. So that's the lane phase game plan for you guys. It's a bit boring because that's ultimately what Vladimir is. His time to shine is really in the mid game and the late game team fights. Alright, let's go to the next part of this video. Alright, so now I'm gonna show you guys how you should side lane on Vladimir. Now, before everybody gets tilted, let me quickly show. So we are 11-0 in this game. Yes, I know I am strong, but that's exactly why I picked this video. It's not to flex like, oh, look at this, I'm 11-0, and no, none of that, right? The reason why I picked a game where I was strong, you don't have to be 11-0, you could be 1-0, or just having a CS gap compared to the enemy mid laner. But I wanted to show a game where I'm either even or stronger than the enemy mid laner. And the reason for that is that many people think that the game is a lot easier when you are fat, right? When you're strong. And that the game is a lot harder when you're behind. I would say that's true in terms of winning, but it's definitely not true in terms of decision making. Because if I am behind, I can't make any decisions almost. It's all reactive based on what the enemy team does. For example, if I am 0-5, right? How can I lane? Like, how can I fight? I can never join a team fight because I'm 0-5, so we should just lose the fight because I'm strong and the enemy mid laner is weak. So then I don't want to fight. So all I have to do is farm until I'm strong again. So then I would go to the side lane, get solo gold, solo XP to become strong. Hopefully while I'm farming, the enemy team is not ending the game. And then if I can get some items in time, maybe I can start joining a fight or two, and then maybe we start winning the game again. But when you're behind, the game is very simple in terms of decision making. However, it's very hard to win it.
when you're winning, when you're really strong, it's easy to win the game. But in terms of decision making, there are so many more options that you could choose from because you are winning, right? So now it's not just sitting in lane and just perma farming. You have all these other options. Do I go for the turret? Do I turret dive? The 1v1 in the side lane? Do I group? All these other options open up, and that's where the difficulty lies. So I really wanted to review a game here to show you if you have a lead or if you're even and you have multiple options, what are the decisions that you should be looking at and what decisions should you be making. So we're going to look at this part of the game here. This is where the side laning starts. So you'll see my ADC right now is still in the bot lane, but that is going to change here. So I just catch the wave. My ADC resets. Of course, the ADC wants to take the next wave that is coming to lane here, right? That is their gold and XP. I shouldn't take that. So I don't take that. So what do? Well, here I go take a raptor camp. Why? I want to hover my teammates right now. Very simple. What is Vladimir's job in the mid game? To side lane. I want to be here in the side lane or here in the side lane. Why? I do that so that I can get solo gold and solo XP, so I'm not sharing my resources with anybody on my team. That's the fastest way to become strong or to extend my lead. Right. Now, so far, Camille is top lane, so I can't go top. The bot wave is completely shoved out, so there's nothing for me to do here. I would only put myself in an overextended position, vulnerable to getting all-in, for basically no minions. So I can't really go here. So what do I tend to do then, when I can't go to a side lane, and I can't get solo gold and solo XP? I'm gonna try and hover around the mid lane, and if possible, take some gold around the mid lane, right? So here in this case, that would be raptors. Now, unfortunately, Xinzao comes and he steals it, you know? So it is what it is, right? This is, yeah, I don't know. Some junglers just get tilted. But look what I'm doing here. So I don't want to show myself. I just want to hover my teammates in the mid lane. Why? Again, I can't side lane. Going top is not an option. Going bot is not an option. So right now, while I wait for a situation where I can go to the side, while I wait for the side lane to be fixed, I have all the time in the world to try and force something here in the mid lane. So what are my options? I could help my mid laner, or my ADC and my support, to shove out the wave with 3 people, right? Like push it out. That will make enemies have to react, so they will have to go here to farm the wave. And if I see that enemies show up here, it's a lot safer to go to the side lane, even when I'm in an overextended position, and then I can just push it out and fix the wave, right? That could be one way to play the game. Now the thing is, if I do that, I would be sharing gold and XP while shoving out this wave to get prio here. I would be sharing gold and XP with my ADC and support, which is of course not ideal. So what do I do then? If I know that I'm already strong and I can miss a little bit of gold and XP, that's completely fine. I will just hover them. I will not take the gold and XP of my ADC, but I will hover them out of vision. If Echo tries to engage onto this, now I'm here in a position to instantly move, and the Echo might not know that, right? In this case, they didn't ward this bush, so they don't see me. So if Echo tries to engage her onto Ezreal, I'm in a really good position to just react to that, right? And I have nothing else to do, right? So that's the idea here. Now Echo plays safe. I'm looking if I can do something here with Rel, but it doesn't look like it. Now Yone is pushing out the wave here, so the wave is right now going to be like, it's going to end up being here, which is a great position for me to be. So right now, I don't have to stay mid lane anymore, and I can go side lane. So here, right now, we have multiple options. Now that we're finally in the side lane, what do we need to do? Again, why are we here in the first place? We are here to get solo gold and solo XP, so we're not sharing resources with teammates. Right? So what are the options? I could look to shove the wave and take this turret. That's always a very good goal, because taking this turret will give you 700 gold. That's an insane amount of value. So that's always a goal, shoving out the wave and ultimately taking the turret. Now the thing is, typically there's going to be an enemy defending the wave, defending the turret. So what could you do then when you're strong, right? You could look to kill the lane opponent and then take the turret. Or you could look to shove out the wave and move. Now I make that sound easy, but if Yone is stronger than me, I can't just walk up and shove out the wave, because he might just walk up and try to kill me. So because I'm stronger right now, I have the opportunity to say, I either look to kill Yone and take his turret, or I ignore the Yone because he can't walk up, he has to respect me. So then I just focus the wave, let him farm the wave, and while he's here stuck farming the wave, I move and maybe create a number advantage in the mid lane, a 5v4 in the mid lane in my team's favor, where we pressure this turret, or we start a fight and we win it because Yone cannot come there because Yone is still here farming. Those are the options that I have, right? So first and foremost, it all starts from, I do have to shove this wave. Whether I want to take this turret, I have to shove the wave. Whether I want to go mid, first I have to shove the wave. Right? And I can do that because I am strong. That's why I say if you are strong in the game, you have so many more options. If Yone was 11-0 and I was 1-4, then Yone would have these opportunities. And what would I have to do then? I would have to back off when I see Yone here. And then I would have to wait until Yone pushes the wave. Maybe I can set up a freeze here and just try to farm as much as possible. Right? Now, if Yone decides to say, okay, he's going to do the same as I want to do this game. So Yone says, okay, Vladimir is weak, so I'm going to push out the wave. I'm going to ignore him, so I just push out the wave. And then I go to his team. While I am freezing here and farming, he could create a 5 versus 4 in his team's favor in the mid lane. And then he might just kill my entire team and win the game. If you're behind, that's something that you're going to have to live with. Because being 1-4, that's your mistake. You shouldn't have to fix that mistake in the side lane. No, you're already in a situation where it becomes incredibly difficult to fix that mistake. So you should have fixed that by playing a better lane phase and not going 1-4, right? Once you're in the side lane, it becomes incredibly difficult to fix that mistake and to get prio and to, so you just have to react to the enemy's play. That's basically what Yone has to do. He can't really do anything. Now, Yone could say, I'm going to coin flip the game. So he could say, I'm just going to go to my turret, protect it, farm. And if Vladimir decides to roam, that's fine by me. Right? Now, if Vladimir gets something here, he is screwed. If Vladimir doesn't get something here, well, he's farming and Vladimir didn't get anything. So he's just maybe slowly getting back into the game. Now, what could Yone do also? What's also an opportunity here in his case? He could say, well, if Vladimir decides to push, I don't care. Like, while Vladimir is pushing and trying to take this turret, even though I'm weak and I'm 1-4, if I go mid lane with my entire team, it's still going to be a 5 versus 4 in my team's favor, right? So in the Yone team's favor. Even though he's weak, he might still win a 5 versus 4. So he might say, well, Vladimir is pushing this, I'm going to coin flip a fight mid lane even though I'm weak, and maybe that's how we win the game. But those are the only options that he has. He either defends it here, tries his best to defend and then freeze and scale, or coin flip a fight mid lane, right? Vladimir has other options. If you're fed, you could say, I push, I try to kill the Yone, and then take a turret for free. Or maybe Yone can't defend the turret and I take the turret. Or maybe Yone is forced to defend it because it's so much gold and then I just move to mid lane. So you see, if you're fed, you have so many more options and so much better options. Now let's see what I do. So I obviously focus here on seeing what I can do. So I try to shove out the wave. I try to get this turret. The thing is, Rel is here. I don't know where the entire enemy team is. The only reason why I can right now push up this far is not just because I'm fed, but also because my entire team is here. Now, of course, I also know my teammates cannot stay here. They're right now invading, but they're gonna have to react at some point here at the mid wave. Because Misfortune is just gonna come here, and if my team stays here, Misfortune is just gonna take my entire mid lane. So they're gonna have to go away. The moment my teammates go away, that's when I will have to play safer or I might be getting collapsed. So right now, here I feel safe to get something done. But hey, my teammates are backing off here in just a bit. Look, they're backing off. They have to react to the enemy ADC pushing the mid wave. So what do? I'm gonna have to back off here in just a bit. So you see, I play safe. I play in this bush. I'm not walking up. I'm not showing myself too much. Playing a bit safe. Now here, I saw Echo, so I'm even gonna go a little bit more, gonna play a little bit more passive here, right? And see, I'm just gonna wait for the wave to be here. Try to push it in. If I see the enemy's mid lane, maybe I turret dive the Yone and kill his turret. Or maybe I just move mid lane and start a fight, depending on what happens in the game. Okay, so here I try to shove the wave. There's nothing to be done. There's not really a fight happening in the mid lane. There's one top lane, but I can't get there. So there's nothing to be done in the mid lane. I can't really shove here because I don't know where Echo is. I don't know where Rel is. I'm gonna reset, spend my gold. Here, this is, again, I want to go side lane. I want to go get solo gold and solo XP. And then make myself strong before the next team fight. However, why am I not going to the side lane here? Well, it's kind of because of this reason. If you don't have teleport, which will often be the case on Vladimir because you like to go Ghost Flash, then you want to side lane in the lane that is closest to the objective. So right now Atakan spawned on the top side of the map, then the closest lane to that would be top lane. So of course I don't want to be bot. I want to be top lane. So that when a fight happens here and I'm farming, I can still react to the fight. The problem with that is right now, Yone is currently pressuring this wave and therefore he's pressuring this turret. That is 700 gold. I don't want to give that to Yone. But my Camille is dead. She will have teleport up in just a bit, so the moment she respawns, she could go bot and defend this, but she's still dead for 30 seconds, and that might be enough time for Yone to push this and then potentially pressure this turret. So right now I am debating, should I go defend this, or should I move to the Atakan? So here, ideally, I defend the turret, hope I'm not too late to a potential Atakan fight, right? And then if Camille respawns, we can fully commit to this play. Now, I was hovering here between mid and bot. I wasn't sure what to do. I was like, okay, maybe they're not doing Atakan. But I also want to wait, like I want to see what Yone does. If Yone keeps on pushing, I'll just have to react. If Yone backs off, I can probably just go here. My Camille will respawn and then she can defend bot lane. So that's exactly why I was hovering here. I took the Raptor camp, I think. I was just hovering between the bot lane here, taking some gold, being in a position where I'm relatively close to Atakan and relatively close to the bot lane to see what I can do. At the moment I see that Yone is not on the bot wave anymore, I know that I can right now go to the Atakan, go to the top side of the map and see what I can do there. Now here Yone shows up again, but Camille spawns in 5 seconds. And she has teleport coming up. So I know I don't have to go defend this, because Camille could go defend this, and even if we start a fight at Atakan, she has teleport coming up, so she might be able to teleport. So I right now have all the time in the world to go side lane, top lane, or if the enemies are already here, maybe we can start a fight. Now it happens to be that the enemies are already here, so we can start a fight here indeed. So we kill the Rel, and then here my decision making would be, so I would want to go side lane, right? We get a kill, so what do? We get the objective, and then I start going side lane again. This is a bit of a weird situation. I don't feel okay to pressure this, because there's still 4 people in the enemy team that are alive. So if we all commit to this, maybe Misfortune takes the entire mid lane, right? Or she gets like a lot of turrets, or she can get like a lot out of this. So right now, before we do the Atakan, knowing that there's still 4 people alive in the enemy team, I want to make sure that Misfortune doesn't take this turret. So my goal here should be very simple, to defend the turret, shove out the mid wave, go to my team, and get the Atakan. Now what do I do, guys? Unfortunately, I'm really strong, and this game I ended up having 1 death, and unfortunately we had it here in the mid-game portion of the game. This is where I died. Now what's the mistake? So I should have defended the wave, pushed out, and helped my teammates shove out top wave, reset for Drake. That's what I should have done. All right. Now, I go here to protect the wave, and my Camille is spam pinging to go on the Misfortune. Now this is bad to follow this call. Why? My teammates are all on the top side of the map. I don't want to split resources. Meaning, if my entire team is top lane, how could the enemy team counter us? Well, they could trade Atakan, but then maybe start a fight here with everybody in the enemy team, so 4 versus us 2, and then they kill me, they get a big shutdown, and maybe that's how they get into a game. Like trading a very big shutdown and another kill on the Camille for an Atakan. That's not the worst trade when you're really behind as a team. So I should make sure that they can't do that, so I should just ignore all of this, push the wave, help my team on Atakan, and not split the team, not split the resources. However, Camille engages, I get caught up in it, I take full responsibility, I shouldn't have followed her, and I shouldn't go with this play. So we end up doing this play, I end up killing the Yone, Echo ends up being very low here, but he lives, and then ultimately I die. Now my team reacts, and because I already did so much damage, we win the fight, but still it was a bad fight, my team had to stop doing Atakan. Okay, now that's all quite irrelevant right now, because now we can go back to what I should be doing. And here I want to go side lane again. Now, there's 2 objectives. In theory, I could go to the dragon. I don't like it. Enemy team is respawning quite quickly. My Camille is dead for 46 seconds, so I don't like it. Also, right now, do I want to move? No. I'm like 700 gold away from finishing my 3rd item, my Shadow Flame. So I will be very strong if I have that third item. Also, right now, I do not have my summoner spell. So I decide to say, I'm very close to my third item. I don't have summoner spells. Camille is dead. I do not want to contest this dragon. I do not want to fight it. Instead, I'm going to go to the side lane, get some extra gold and XP for my item, wait for my summoner spells, and then, when I'm strong, that's when I want to fight. So while everybody's going for the dragon, I'm going to make myself strong for the next fight, to make sure that we win the next fight of the game. So look, I do all of this, I recall here, and what do we get? We get our Shadow Flame in base. I'm a little bit closer to having my Ghost up again. It's still 1.5 minutes, but it's a little bit closer right now. And now we're in a better spot because I have 3 items. Now I feel safe to fight. So where do we go? Again, the side lane. That's all we want to do. We go to the side lane. So very simple. In what side lane do I want to be? I want to be in the side lane where the next objective is going to spawn, or where the current objective is. So far, there's already an objective spawned. It's the Atakan. So I want to be at Atakan, right? Because I have no teleport, I always have to be in the side that's closest to the objective. So here I could go get the wave, push it out, or we could start a fight if we think that the enemies are already here pressuring it. I'm really, really strong right now, so I can't just fight this. That's why I skipped the dragon fight. So that right now I would have 3 items and I would know that I just win this fight. Right? So we fight this. So I'm gonna fast forward this because we kill the entire enemy team. So I'm gonna fast forward this a little bit. So we kill the enemy team. It's a little bit sad because we kill them, but what's gonna happen? My top laner is dead again. My ADC is dead. We're kind of low, like this guy wants to recall, so we're not really in a position to take the Atakan. So what will I do? I will just shove out the wave, get solo gold, solo XP, because I know we can't take this right now, so we're gonna have to recall. By that time the enemies will come, so there will be another Atakan fight, right? So what's gonna happen here? I wanted to take the wave, recall, make myself as strong as possible for the next fight, so I want to spend all my gold and not stay on the map here. So I do that, I spend all my gold. And now again, where do I want to go? I want to go to the side lane that's closest to the objectives. Right now, Baron and Atakan are up, they're both on the top side of the map, so I want to be in the top lane. And then my Camille could go bot lane, which is completely fine, because her teleport is coming up, so in case there would be a fight, she would still be able to move here. Now, something else that I want to mention, just like in the beginning of this mid-game review that we're doing. Right now, I can't go bot because Camille should go there. I could go top, right? But the wave was still pretty far shifted out the moment I started moving mid lane. So that's why I started moving mid lane. I saw the wave was still pretty far out in a bad spot. So I thought, let's first go mid lane, potentially shove out the wave with our team. So enemies have to react and come and farm this. And while enemies are stuck here, that's when I can go to the top lane and shove this wave out safely because I know the enemies are in mid. Right. Now, I see that, hey, Yone, the enemy Yone, is pushing this wave and is fixing it to make it in a good position again. So I can just instantly run to the side lane. So I run instantly to the side lane to get solo gold, solo XP. We are close to the Atakan and to the Baron. So in case a fight is happening, we can instantly react. So that's exactly what I do. My entire team is fighting here. They're grouping. So I'm just joining them to fight. So the way you should see this, all of this is basically just an interruption of me farming. The reason why I'm here right now is because I want to farm. And I want to farm in the side lane closest to the objective in case my team or the enemy team starts a fight for this objective, I'm in a position to move. Now, if I'm behind, I might not want to fight. So then I could say I'm going to focus on just shoving out the wave, maybe going mid lane, then taking the wave, or going bot lane, then taking the wave. Because then it doesn't matter as much that I'm close to the objective, because if I don't want to contest the objective because I'm very weak, I might as well go anywhere on the map as long as I'm getting something. A turret or minion waves or jungle camps, whatever. But right now we are ahead and that's why I really want to be close to the objective. Because I know if a fight is going to start, I could be the game changer in that fight. So that's why we go top lane. We start a fight here with the team, so I just joined them. We kill the enemy team. This time everybody in the team still lives, so we get to do the Atakan. Now again, after an objective, what do I typically like to do? After an objective, while the enemies are dead, I try to take something, like I try to shove in waves, maybe take a turret.
then recall, spend my gold for the next fight, so that by the time the enemies are on the map again and they want to fight again, I spend all my gold and I'm strong again. Now in this case, while the enemies are still dead, next to the Atakan there's also a Baron that's up. So I feel like we can just easily do the Baron. So we go for the Baron. Ultimately, Echo ends up stealing it with like a great play. So we might as well show that. So Echo goes there. So I think he's pretty far away. I can just kill it with my EQ combo. What happens? My EQ combo here, or my E combo, is not gonna kill it. It's gonna live at 130 HP. Echo ulted back, flashed over the wall, and killed it. So it's a bit unlucky. He ulted, he had ult, he had flash, and so he could steal it. And my combo didn't kill the Baron. It was very close. So all of that was a bit, a bit sad. But hey, Echo is dead. The entire enemy team is dead. They don't benefit from Baron. So what do? While they are dead, we try to take as much as possible. We try to shift out waves, take turrets, and then reset in time so that before the enemies are back on the map again, we are also back on the map with our gold spent so that when a new fight happens, we're strong again. Now again, in this situation, I wouldn't shove out waves and I wouldn't take a turret because we can just do the Drake while the enemies are dead. Right. Now this is a bit of a mistake by me. I feel like Xin Zhao can probably do it by himself. He can probably take this before the enemies get here. So it might have been better to just go top lane and try and take this turret while Xin Zhao is doing the Drake himself. That probably would have been a better call. But yeah, in hindsight, it's always easy to see this. But yeah, so here I help him with the dragon. And then again, where do we go? Solo gold, solo XP. I go to the side lane. Now keep in mind, we did make all of these plays. The enemies are starting to get back onto the map again, and I haven't spent my gold yet. I'm sitting at 2k gold. So of course, after shoving this wave, I will instantly recall, spend my gold. And now again, ideally, I could go to the side lane, get solo gold, solo XP, right? Wait until an objective spawns, then I want to side lane and the side that's closest to the objectives, and rinse and repeat, right? Now, right now, I have 4 items completed. The enemy within has 2 items completed. So at this point, there is not too much macro to be done. I don't have to go to the side. I am already strong. So basically right now, I can just group with my team, right? And we should just win every single fight because I'm that strong. So we group, we win this fight. The thing is, we win it, but all the enemies, like they all escape super low health, but they don't die. So now I don't have ult, so I have to be a bit careful. So while I don't have ult, I kind of want to just go farm, so I could go to the side lane here, but it feels a bit scary because my teammates are still all the way here, so going here means that I could potentially get collapsed. So what do? I go farm because I don't want to fight, but I don't show up top lane because I don't want to get collapsed. So I go into my own jungle, I take the camps, and then here when I see a fight, I instantly react because I'm just that fat. I know if I go there, I just win. I'm 18-1, I have 4 items. So I just go there and I win. We win this fight here ultimately, and then we just end up ending the game. Now here, if I wasn't this strong, and I'm not sure that I win the fight, I would just go top lane, get solo gold, get solo XP, maybe take the turret while my teammates are fighting, then look to reset, spend my gold, and maybe then, when an objective spawns, a dragon or a baron again, that's when I want to fight again, because I will have a lot of gold, because I side laned. So hopefully that is something right now that you guys understand. I took this game in particular because it's not super easy macro this game. There are some weird situations where you kind of want to go in 2 places at the same time, and it's not always easy. So I really took this game with a little bit harder macro than like a standard game that you typically see on YouTube, to really share my thought process and how to play Vladimir even in these weird games. But that's the basic macro for the side laning. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Now let's talk about some common mistakes and just some tips and tricks for playing Vladimir. Number 1, not buying Dark Seal early. Dark Seal is an extremely gold efficient item, and Vladimir's passive makes it even more gold efficient, so you should go it every single game. Now that doesn't mean that you always have to upgrade it into a Magi's, but you definitely should always go Dark Seal. Now, what I like to do, on my first base, I typically like to get Boots of Speed, a Dark Seal, and then if I have some gold left, something like an Amp Tone. Number 2, wasting sums for non-game deciding moments. Often when I coach Vladimir players, I see them burn their Flash and Ghost for a random solo kill in the side lane,
when Baron spawns in 2 minutes, meaning that possibly they won't have their summoner spells available for the Baron fight, which is one of the most important fights in the game, so of course that's not ideal. As a Vladimir in the late game, you will be able to win from almost everyone, but that doesn't mean that you should try to do that. It's all about syncing your summoner spells with objective team fights and killing people when you should kill them. It's all about timing. Number 3, playing too passive in lane. We all know Vladimir is a scaling champion, and while the early game is his weakest moment, that doesn't mean that it's his weak moment. Vladimir actually has quite high base damage. It's just other factors that are limiting him from being like a very strong early game champion. Those things are the fact that he's, for example, short ranged and immobile and he has very long ability cooldowns, but he still has high base damage. So that being said, if you can find windows to punish your lane opponent, you definitely should. Don't fall into the trap of completely ignoring your lane opponent because you scale. Test your limits and see how aggressive you can play. Number 4, not side laning enough. Too many Vladimir players focus on farming actually maybe too much in the early game and then completely avoid trading, but then once they get to the side laning, they actually forget to farm and they just overgroup during the mid game. So side laning is the number 1 thing that will make you strong as a Vladimir. So once the mid game starts, go to the side lane, collect the solo gold and XP, and make sure that you become strong for the next objective team fight. Number 5, speaking of those objective team fights, Vladimir players typically struggle with finding flank opportunities. They don't play enough around vision and permanently show themselves right before an important fight. You should hide yourself and play around vision. Because if you always show yourself right before an important fight starts, it makes it very easy for, let's say, the enemy ADC to position in a way where you can't really reach them. On top of that, as Vlad, you should adopt an assassin type approach to teamfights, where looking for flank angles often results in winning teamfights compared to trying to play front to back. And vision control helps a lot with that. Number 6, during the lane phase, don't stay full HP. Vladimir has lots of sustain in his kit, so if you're permanently full HP, your healing is actually useless because you're not utilizing it. So if you're full HP, look to trade with your opponent and then just heal back up. And that's how you get an advantage over your opponent, because most mid lane opponents can't heal up as quickly as a Vladimir. So if you constantly trade, you heal up, they can't in between trades, then they get lower and lower and you will just stay quite healthy. Number 8, perma-freezing and being tunnel visioned on the lane phase. While using wave mechanics such as freezing could be really great to gain an early lead, starting from about level 7, 8, 9, which is about 8 minutes into the game, it's actually a lot better often to try and push the mid wave to establish lane prio. Because from this point onwards, there's so much to do on the map, such as diving the enemy mid laner, taking the mid lane turret plates, invading the enemy jungler, diving the enemy bot lane, etc. Like there's so many things to do that are better than just freezing, so you shouldn't freeze anymore. Number 9, not tracking your teammates, specifically before and during teamfights. Too often do I see Vladimir players lose themselves completely during a fight. They are so tunnel visioned on teamfighting and targeting the enemy backline that often they are not aware of their teammates not being able to follow up the play. For example, if you ghost flash onto the enemy Draven in a teamfight, do you even know if your team can follow up the play? Perhaps if you have a Rakan support and a Zac jungle, so both good champions with gap closers, they might actually be able to follow your engage. But did you check that before the fight? Did you check that before you engaged? Because maybe you have a Lulu support and an Udyr jungle who definitely can't follow your engage. And then you might have to play the fight completely different and a lot slower. And last but not least, number 10, the main character syndrome. Once you finally got all the items you need to carry as Vladimir and easily 1v3 for example, the biggest mistake you could make is actually to do that 1v3 fight. It's not because you are strong enough to do something that therefore you should do it. Because even if you are really strong and you played well, you can indeed perhaps do a 1v3. But what if you make a mechanical mistake? Now you might die and you might actually lose the game because you made an ego play. That's why I call this the main character syndrome. When you're really strong, you have your items, all you have to do basically is not make a crazy flashy play. And instead, play around your team and put yourself in a position where even if you were to make lots of mistakes, you would still win the fight. That's of course a lot better than trying to make an ego play and trying to be very flashy for no reason at all and then you lose the game because of mechanical mistakes. Alright, that's it for the common mistakes and tips and tricks. Now let's move on to the matchup tier list. About matchup tier lists, let me say this. I find them actually quite pointless, because you can't really create a matchup tier list since there are so many variables that can make the same matchup either easy or difficult. For example, the Swain matchup is quite easy in lane, but then in team fights it's actually very hard to kill him and he does a good job of matching you in terms of team fight value. So the matchup is basically easy, but also relatively difficult at the same time. And I'll also give you another example. So for example, let's say you play versus LeBlanc, right? LeBlanc is a difficult matchup to lane against pre-level 6. However, after level 6, you can ult her on repeat and give yourself a free lane. So the matchup is actually relatively fine. But since she has so much gank setup with her E, her chains, the matchup becomes very difficult if the enemy team has a good early game jungler like a Lee Sin, for example. Now, I did make a tier list just because I know everyone loves tier lists, but that's basically the only reason, so I'm not gonna go over it. But with that being said, let's move on to the skin tier list. Alright, let's talk about Vladimir's skins. Now, I know this is kinda subjective, but then again, there is also an objective factor to it, in the sense that we can judge if the skin is objectively smooth or clunky. Now, I would say every Vladimir skin feels pretty smooth. So you can't really go wrong with any skin. Of course, unless you go Cafe Virgin Vladimir, no further explanation needed on that one. And if you disagree, then you're probably not cut out to be a Vladimir main. Now, I'm obviously just kidding. Maybe I'm not though. But okay, one last thing I would like to say is that yes, I do like the new Noxian Vladimir skin. I get asked this question a lot. I like it, it's very smooth, it looks cool. But ultimately, it's nothing special, you know? So to me, the Noxian Vladimir skin, it should be Vladimir's base skin. It would make so much sense. But okay, we've arrived at the end of the Season 15 Vladimir guide. If you're still watching, you are an absolute legend. Know that I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for watching the entire guide and good luck with your climb. Now, since I appreciate you so much for sticking around here all the way to the end, I'll give you actually a 10% discount if you ever want to book my coaching. Now, if you do, just let me know that you heard about the 10% discount and then I'll know that you watched the video until the very end. Now, with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on your way out. And of course, I am looking forward to see you in my next video.